The supreme sign, the observations of a traveler, questioning the universe concerning his maker, in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. The seven heavens and the earth and all that is in them extol and glorify him, and there is nothing but glorifies him with praise, but you understand not their glorifying. Indeed, he is most forbearing, most forgiving. Shua, Quran 17:44. This second station, in addition to explaining the above sublime verse, sets out the proofs, arguments, and meaning of the first station, which has been skipped, since this sublime verse, like many other Quranic verses, mentions first the heavens, that brilliant page proclaiming God's unity, gazed on at all times and by all men with wonder and joy, in its pronouncement of the creator of this cosmos. Let us too begin with a mention of the heavens. Indeed, every voyager who comes to the hospice and the realm of this world opens his eyes and wonders who is the master of this fine hospice, which resembles a most generous banquet, a most ingenious exhibition, a most impressive camp and training ground, a most amazing and wondrous place of recreation, a most profound and wise place of instruction. He asks himself too, who is the author of this great book, and who is the monarch of this lofty realm? There first presents itself to him the beautiful face of the heavens, inscribed with the gilt lettering of the stars. That face calls him, saying, "Look at me, and I shall guide you to what you seek." He looks then and sees a manifestation of dominicality, performing various tasks in the heavens. It holds aloft in the heavens, without any supporting pillar, hundreds of thousands of heavenly bodies, some of which are 1,000 times heavier than the earth and revolve 70 times faster than a cannonball. It causes them to move in harmony and swiftly without colliding with each other. It causes innumerable lamps to burn constantly without the use of any oil. It disposes of these great masses without any disturbance or disorder. It sets sun and moon to work at their respective tasks, without those great bodies ever rebelling. It administers within infinite space, the magnitude of which cannot be measured in figures, should they stretch from pole to pole. All that exists at the same time, with the same strength, in the same fashion, manner and mold, without the least deficiency. It reduces to submissive obedience to its law all the aggressive powers inherent in those bodies. It cleanses and lustrates the face of the heavens, removing all the sweepings and refuse of that vast assembly. It causes those bodies to maneuver like a disciplined army, and then, making the earth revolve, it shows the heavens each night and each year in a different form, like a cinema screen displaying true and imaginative scenes to the audience of creation. There is within this dominical activity a truth consisting of subjugation, administration, revolution, ordering, cleansing, and employment. This truth, with its grandeur and comprehensiveness, bears witness to the necessary existence and unity of the Creator of the heavens, and testifies to that existence being more manifest than that of the heavens. Hence it was said in the first degree of the first station, "There is no God but God, the necessary being, to whose necessary existence in unity the heavens and all they contain testify, through the testimony of the sublimity of the comprehensiveness of the truth of subjugation, administration, revolution, ordering, cleansing, and employment, a truth vast and perfect, and to be observed. Then that wondrous place of gathering, known as space or the atmosphere, begins thunderously to proclaim to that traveler, come as a guest to the world, look at me, you can discover and find through me the object of your search, the one who sent you here." The traveler looks at the sour but kind face of the atmosphere, and listening to the awesome but joyous thunderclaps perceives the following: "The clouds, suspended between the sky and the earth, water the garden of the world in the most wise and merciful fashion, furnish the inhabitants of the earth with the water of life, modify the natural heat of life, and hasten to bestow aid wherever it is needed. In addition to fulfilling these and other duties, the vast clouds, capable of filling the heavens, sometimes hide themselves, with their parts retiring to rest, so that not a trace can be seen, just like a well-disciplined army showing and hiding itself in accordance with sudden orders. Then, the very instant the command is given to pour down rain, the clouds gather in 1 hour, or rather in a few minutes. They fill the sky and await further orders from their commander. Next, the traveler looks at the wind in the atmosphere and sees that the air is employed wisely and generously in such numerous tasks that it is as if each of the inanimate atoms of that unconscious air were hearing and noting the orders coming from that monarch of the universe. Without neglecting a single one of them, it performs them in ordered fashion and through the power of the monarch. Thereby it gives breath to all beings and conveys to all living things the heat, light, and electricity they need, and transmits sound, as well as aiding in the pollination of plants. The traveler then looks at the rain and sees that within those delicate, glistening, sweet drops, sent from a hidden treasury of mercy, there are so many compassionate gifts and functions contained that it is as if mercy itself were assuming shape and flowing forth from the dominical treasury in the form of drops. It is for this reason that rain has been called mercy. Next, the traveler looks at the lightning and listens to the thunder and says that both of these two are employed in one wondrous tasks. Then taking his eyes off these, he looks to his own intellect and says, "The inanimate, lifeless cloud that resembles carded cotton has of course no knowledge of us. When it comes to our aid, it is not because it takes pity on us. It cannot appear and disappear without receiving orders. Rather, it acts in accordance with the orders of a most powerful and compassionate commander. First it disappears without leaving a trace, then suddenly reappears in order to begin its work. By the command and power of a most active and exalted, a most magnificent and splendid monarch, it fills and then empties the atmosphere. Inscribing the sky with wisdom and erasing the pattern, it makes of the sky a tablet of effacement and affirmation, a depiction of the gathering and the resurrection. By the contriving of a most generous and bountiful, a most munificent and solicitous sustainer, a ruler who regulates and disposes, it mounts the wind, and taking with it treasuries of rain, each as heavy as a mountain, hastens to the aid of the needy. It is as if it were weeping over them in pity, with its tears causing the flowers to smile, tempering the heat of the sun, spraying gardens with water, and washing and cleansing the face of the earth. That wandering traveler then tells his own intellect, "These hundreds of thousands of wise, merciful, and ingenious tasks and acts of generosity and mercy that arise from the veil and outer form of this inanimate, lifeless, unconscious, volatile, unstable, stormy, unsettled, and inconstant air, clearly establish that this diligent wind, this tireless servant, never acts of itself, but rather in accordance with the orders of a most powerful and knowing, a most wise and generous commander. It is as if each particle were aware of every single task, like a soldier, understanding and hearkening to every order of its commander, for it hears and obeys every dominical command that courses through the air. It aids all animals to breathe and to live, all plants to pollinate and grow, and cultivates all the matter necessary for their survival. It directs and administers the clouds, makes possible the voyaging of sailing ships, and enables sounds to be conveyed, particularly by means of wireless, telephone, telegraph, and radio, as well as numerous other universal functions. Now these atoms, each composed of two such simple materials as hydrogen and oxygen, and each resembling the other, exist in hundreds of thousands of different fashions all over the globe. I conclude therefore that they are being employed and set to work in the utmost orderliness by a hand of wisdom, as the verse makes clear, and the disposition of the winds and the clouds held in disciplined order between the heavens and the earth. Quran 2:164. Shoamichi Jim Seyr-i. The one who through the disposition of the winds employs them in countless dominical functions, who through the ordering of the clouds uses them in infinite tasks of mercy, and who creates the air in this fashion. Such a one can only be the possessor of necessary existence, the one empowered over all things and knowledgeable of all things, the sustainer endowed with glory and generosity. This is the conclusion our traveler now draws. Then he looks at the rain and sees that within it are contained benefits as numerous as the raindrops, and dominical manifestations as multiple as the particles of rain, and instances of wisdom as plentiful as its atoms. Those sweet, delicate, and blessed drops are moreover created in so beautiful and ordered a fashion that particularly the rain sent in the summertime is dispatched and caused to fall with such balance and regularity that not even stormy winds that cause large objects to collide can destroy its equilibrium and order. The drops do not collide with each other or merge in such fashion as to become harmful masses of water. Water, composed of two simple elements like hydrogen and oxygen, is employed in hundreds of thousands of other wise, purposeful tasks and arts, particularly in animate beings, although it is itself inanimate and unconscious. Rain, which is then the very embodiment of divine mercy, can only be manufactured in the unseen treasury of mercy of one most compassionate and merciful, and on its descent expounds in physical form the verse, "And he it is who sends down rain after men have despaired, and thus spreads out his mercy." Quran 42:28. The traveler next listens to the thunder and watches the lightning. He understands that these two wondrous events in the atmosphere are like a material demonstration of the verse, "The thunder glorifies his praise but then." Quran 13:13. The brilliance of his lightning almost robs them of their sight. Quran 24:43. They also announce the coming of rain and thus give glad tidings to the needy. Yes, this sudden utterance of a miraculous sound by the atmosphere, the filling of the dark sky with the flash and fire of lightning, the setting alight of the clouds that resemble mountains of cotton or pipes bursting with water and snow, these and similar phenomena are like a blow struck on the head of the negligent man whose gaze is directed down at the earth. They tell him, "Lift up your head, look at the miraculous deeds of the most active and powerful being who wishes to make himself known." In the same way that you are not left to your own devices, so too these phenomena and events have a master and a purpose. Each of them is caused to fulfill a particular task, and each is employed by a most wise disposer. The wondering traveler hears then the lofty and manifest testimony to the truth that is composed of the disposition of the winds, the descent of the rains, and the administration of the events of the atmosphere, and says, I believe in God. That which was stated in the second degree of the first station expresses the observations of the traveler concerning the atmosphere. There is no God but God, the necessary being, to whose necessary existence in unity the atmosphere and all it contains testifies, through the testimony of the sublimity, of the comprehensiveness, of the truth of subjugation, disposal, causing to descend, and regulation, a truth vast and perfect, and to be observed. Next, the globe addresses that thoughtful traveler, now growing accustomed to his reflective journey. Why are you wandering through the heavens, through space and the sky? Come, I will make known to you what you are seeking. Look at the functions that I perform and read my pages. He looks and sees that the globe, like an ecstatic Mevlevi dervish with its twofold motion, is tracing out around the field of the supreme gathering a circle that determines the succession of days, years, and seasons. It is a most magnificent dominical ship, loaded with the hundreds of thousands of different forms of food and equipment needed for all animate beings, floating with the utmost equilibrium in the ocean of space and circling the sun. He then looks at the pages of the earth and sees that each page of each of its chapters proclaims the sustainer of the earth in thousands of verses. Being unable to read the whole of it, he looks at the page dealing with the creation and deployment of animate beings in the spring and observes the following. The forms of the countless members of hundreds of thousands of species emerge in the utmost precision from a simple material and are then nurtured in most merciful fashion. Then, in miraculous manner, wings are given to some of the seeds. They take to flight and are thus dispersed. They are most effectively distributed, most carefully fed and nurtured. Countless tasty and delicious forms of food in the most merciful and tender fashion are brought forth from dry clay and from roots, seeds, and drops of liquid that differ little among each other. Every spring, 100,000 kinds of food and equipment are loaded on it from an unseen treasury, as if onto a railway wagon, and are dispatched in utmost orderliness to animate beings. The sending to infants of canned milk in those food packages and pumps of sugared milk in the form of their mothers' affectionate breasts is in particular such an instance of solicitousness, mercy, and wisdom that it immediately establishes itself as a most tender manifestation of the mercy and generosity of the merciful and compassionate one. In short, this living page of spring displays 100,000 examples and samples of the supreme gathering, and is a tangible demonstration of this verse. So look to the signs of God's mercy, how he gives life to the earth after its death, for verily he it is who gives life to the dead, and he has power over all things. Quran 30:50. Pod'u. Moreover, this verse may be said to express in miraculous fashion the meanings of the page that is spring. The traveler thus understood that the earth proclaims through all its pages, in fashion proportionate to their size, there is no God but he. A phrase repeated many times in the Quran, in expression of the meaning beheld by the traveler through the brief testimony of one of the 20 aspects of a single page out of the more than 20 pages of the globe. It was said in the third degree of the first station, there is no God but God, the necessary being, to whose necessary existence in unity the earth with all that is in it and upon it testifies, through the testimony of the sublimity, of the comprehensiveness, of the truth of subjugation, disposition, nurturing, opening, distribution of seeds, protection, administration, the giving of life to all animate beings, compassion and mercy, universal and general, a truth vast and perfect and to be observed. Then that reflective traveler read each page of the cosmos, and as he did so, his faith, that key to felicity, strengthened. His gnosis, that key to spiritual progress, increased. His belief in God, the source and foundation of all perfection, developed 1 degree more. His joy and pleasure augmented and aroused his eagerness, and while listening to the perfect and convincing lessons given by the sky, by space and the earth, he cried out for more. Then he heard the rapturous invocation of God made by the tumult of the seas and the great rivers, and listened to their sad yet pleasant sounds. In numerous ways they were saying to him, look at us, read also our signs. Looking, our traveler saw the following. The seas, constantly and vitally surging, merging and pouring forth with an inclination to conquest inherent in their very nature, surrounded the earth, and together with the earth, revolved extremely swiftly in a circle of 25,000 years in a single year. Yet the seas did not disperse, did not overflow or encroach on the land contiguous to them. They moved and stood still, and were protected by the command and power of a most powerful and magnificent being. Then looking to the depths of the sea, the traveler saw that apart from the the most beautiful, well-adorned and symmetrical jewels, there were thousands of different kinds of animal, sustained and ordered, brought to life and caused to die, in so disciplined a fashion, their provision coming from mere sand and salt water, that it established irresistibly the existence of a powerful and glorious, a merciful and beauteous being administering and giving life to them. The traveler then looks at the rivers and sees that the benefits inherent in them, the functions they perform, and their continual replenishment are inspired by such wisdom and mercy, as indisputably to prove that all rivers, springs, streams, and great waterways flow forth from the treasury of mercy of the compassionate one, the Lord of glory and generosity. They are preserved and dispensed indeed in so extraordinary a fashion that it is said 4 rivers flow forth from paradise. See Muslim Jana 26. The rivers, Sayhan, Jehan, Euphrates, and Nile, that is, they transcend by far apparent causes, and flow forth instead from the treasury of a non-material paradise, from the superabundance of an unseen and inexhaustible source. For example, the blessed Nile that turns the sandy land of Egypt into a paradise flows from the mountains of the moon in the south without ever being exhausted, as if it were a small sea. If the water that flowed down the river in 6 months were gathered together in the form of a mountain and then frozen, it would be larger than those mountains. But the place in the mountains where the water is lodged and stored is less than 1/6 of their mass. As for the water that replenishes the river, the rain that enters the reservoir of the river is very sparse in that torrid region and is quickly swallowed up by the thirsty soil. Hence it is incapable of maintaining the equilibrium of the river. A tradition has thus grown up that the blessed Nile springs in miraculous fashion from an unseen paradise. This tradition has profound meaning and expresses a beautiful truth. The traveler saw then 1,000th part of the truths and affirmations contained in the oceans and rivers. The seas proclaim unanimously, with a power proportionate to their extent, there is no God but He, and produce as witnesses to their testimony all the creatures that inhabit them. This our traveler perceived, expressing and conveying the testimony of the seas and the rivers, we said, in the 4th degree of the first station. There is no God but God, the necessary existent, to the necessity of whose existence in unity point all the seas and the rivers, together with all they contain, by the testimony of the sublimity of the comprehensiveness of the truth of subjugation, preservation, storing up, and administration, vast and well ordered, and to be observed. Then the traveler is summoned on his meditative journey by the mountains and the plains. Read 2 our pages, they say. Looking, he sees that the universal function and duty of mountains is of such grandeur and wisdom as to stupefy the intelligence. The mountains emerge from the earth by the command of their sustainer, thereby palliating the turmoil, anger, and rancor that arise from disturbances within the earth. As the mountains surge upward, the earth begins to breathe. It is delivered from harmful tremors and upheavals, and its tranquility, as it pursues its duty of rotation, is no longer disturbed. In the same way that masts are planted in ships to protect them from turbulence and preserve their balance, so too mountains are set up on the deck of the ship that is the earth, as masts and stores, as is indicated by verses of the Quran of miraculous exposition such as these. And the mountains as pegs, literacy. Quran 78:7, and we have cast down anchors. Quran 57, and the mountains he anchored them. Quran 79:32. Then too, there are stored up and preserved in the mountains all kinds of springs, waters, minerals, and other materials needed by animate beings in so wise, skillful, generous, and foreseeing a fashion that they prove that they are the storehouses and warehouses and servants of one possessing infinite power, one possessing infinite wisdom. Deducing from these 2 examples the other duties and instances of wisdom as great as mountains, of the mountains and plains, the traveler sees through the general instances of wisdom in them, and particularly in regard to the fashion in which all manner of things are stored up in them providentially, the testimony they give, and the divine unity they proclaim, declaring there is no God but He. A declaration as powerful and firm as the mountains, and vast and expansive as the plains, and he too says, I believe in God. In expression of this meaning, it was said in the 5th degree of the first station, there is no God but God, to the necessity of whose existence point all the mountains and plains together with what is in them and upon them, by the testimony of the sublimity of the comprehensiveness of the truth of the storing up, administration, dissemination of seed, preservation and regulation, a truth providential, dominical, vast, general, well ordered and perfect, and to be observed observed. Then while that traveler was traveling in his mind through the mountains and plains, the gate to the arboreal and vegetable realm was opened before him. He was summoned inside. "Come," they said, "inspect our realm and read our inscriptions." Entering, he saw that a splendid and well-adorned assembly for the proclamation of God's unity, and a circle for the mentioning of his names and the offering of thanks to him, had been drawn up. He understood for the very appearance of all trees and plants that their different species were proclaiming unanimously, "There is no God but He," for he perceived three great and general truths indicating and proving that all fruit-giving trees and plants, with the tongue of their symmetrical and eloquent leaves, the phrases of their charming and loquacious flowers, the words of their well-ordered and well-spoken fruits, were testifying to God's glory and bearing witness that there is no God but He. The first, in the same way that in each of the plants and trees a deliberate bounty and generosity is to be seen in most obvious fashion, and a purposive liberality and munificence, so too it is to be seen in the totality of the trees and plants with the brilliance of sunlight. The second, the wise and purposive distinction and differentiation, one that cannot in any way be attributed to chance, the deliberate and merciful adornment and giving of form. All this is to be seen as clearly as daylight in the infinite varieties and species. They show themselves to be the works and embroideries of an all-wise Maker. The third, the opening and unfolding of all the separate members of the 100,000 species of that infinite realm, each in its own distinct fashion and shape, in the utmost order, equilibrium and beauty, from well-defined, limited, simple and solid seeds and grains, identical to each other, or nearly so, there emerging from those seeds in distinct and separate form, with utter equilibrium, vitality and wise purpose without the least error or mistake, is a truth more brilliant than the sun. The witnesses proving this truth are as numerous as the flowers, fruits, and leaves that emerge in the spring. So the traveler said, "Praise be to God for the blessing of belief." In expression of these truths and the testimony given to them, we said in the 6th degree of the first station, "There is no God but God, to the necessity of whose existence in unity points the consensus of all the species of trees and plants that are engaged in glorifying God and speak with the eloquent and well-ordered words of their leaves, their loquacious and comely flowers, their well-ordered and well-spoken fruits, by the testimony of the sublimity of the comprehensiveness of the truth of bestowal, bounty, and generosity, done in purposive mercy, and the truth of differentiation, adornment, and decoration, done with will and wisdom. Definite, too, is the indication given by the truth of the opening of all their symmetrical, adorned, distinct, variegated, and infinite forms, from seeds and grains that resemble and approximate each other, that are finite and limited." As this traveler through the cosmos proceeded on his meditative journey with increased eagerness and a bouquet of gnosis and faith, itself like a spring gathered from the garden of the spring, there opened before his truth-perceiving intellect, his cognitive reason, the gate to the animal and bird realm. With hundreds of thousands of different voices and various tongues, he was invited to enter. Entering, he saw that all the animals and birds, in their different species, groups, and nations, were proclaiming silently and aloud, "There is no God but He," and had thus turned the face of the earth into a vast place of invocation, an expansive assembly for the proclamation of God's glory. He saw each of them to be like an ode dedicated to God, a word proclaiming His glory, a letter indicating His mercy, each of them describing the Maker and offering Him thanks and encomium. It was as if the senses, powers, members, and instruments of those animals and birds were orderly and balanced words, or perfect and disciplined expressions. He observed three great and comprehensive truths indicating in decisive form their offering of thanks to the Creator and Provider and their testimony to His unity. The first, their being brought into existence with wisdom and purpose, and their creation full of art in a fashion that in no way can be attributed to chance, to blind force, or inanimate nature. Their being created and composed in purposive and knowledgeable manner. Their animation and being given life in a way that displays in 20 aspects the manifestation of knowledge, wisdom, and will. All of this is a truth that bears witness to the necessary existence of the eternally living and self-subsistent, His 7 attributes and unity, a witness repeated to the number of all animate beings. The second, there appears from the distinction made among those infinite beings, and from their adornment and decoration in a fashion by which their features are different, their shapes adorned, their proportions measured and symmetrical, and their forms well ordered, there appears from this a truth so vast and powerful that none other than the one powerful over all things, the one knowledgeable of all things, could lay claim to it. This comprehensive act, which displays in every respect thousands of wonders and instances of wisdom, it is impossible and precluded that anything other than such a one could lay claim to it. The third, the emergence and unfolding of those countless creatures in their hundreds of thousands of different shapes and forms, each of which is a miracle of wisdom, their emergence from eggs and drops of water called sperm that are identical with each other or closely resemble each other and are limited and finite in number, all this in the most orderly, symmetrical, and unfailing fashion, is so brilliant a truth as to be illumined with proofs and evidences as numerous as the animals themselves. By the consensus of these three truths, all the species of animals are engaged together in testifying that there is no God but He. It is as if the whole earth, like a great man, were saying, "There is no God but He," in a manner befitting its vastness, and conveying its testimony to the dwellers of the heaven. The traveler saw this and understood it perfectly. In expression of these truths, we said in the 7th degree of the first station, "There is no God but God, to whose necessary existence in unity points the consensus of all animals and birds that praise God and bear witness to Him with the words of their senses, their faculties and powers, words well balanced, ordered and eloquent, with the words of their limbs and members, words perfect and persuasive, by the testimony of the sublimity, of the comprehensiveness, of the truth of bringing into being, making and creating according to will, the truth of distinction and decoration according to purpose, and the truth of proportioning and forming according to wisdom." Definite, too, is the indication given by the truth of the opening of all of their orderly, distinct, variegated, and infinite forms out of identical or similar eggs and drops of sperm that are finite and limited. That meditative voyager, in order to advance farther in the infinite degrees and countless luminous stages of knowledge of God, then wished to enter the world of men, the realm of humanity. Humanity, headed by the prophets, invited him, and he accepted the invitation. Looking first at the stopping place of the past, he saw that all of the prophets, peace and blessings be upon him, the most luminous and perfect of humankind, were reciting in chorus, "No God but He," and making remembrance of God. With the power of their brilliant, well-attested, and innumerable miracles, they were proclaiming God's unity, and in order to advance man from the animal state to angelic degree, they were instructing men and summoning them to belief in God. Kneeling down in that school of light, he too paid heed to the lesson. He saw that in the hand of each of those teachers, the most exalted and renowned of all celebrated human beings, there were numerous miracles bestowed on them by the Creator of all being, as a sign confirming their mission. Further, a large group of men, a whole community, had confirmed their claims and come to belief at their hands, a truth assented to and confirmed by these hundreds of thousands of serious and veracious individuals, unanimously and in full agreement, was bound to be firm and definitive. He understood, too, that the people of misguidance, in denying a truth attested and affirmed by so many veracious witnesses, were committing a most grievous error, indeed crime, and were therefore deserving of a most grievous punishment. He recognized by contrast those who assented to the truth and believed in it as being the most true and righteous, and a further degree of the sanctity of belief became apparent to him. Yes, the infinite miracles bestowed by God on the prophets, peace be upon them, each one being like a confirmation of their mission, the heavenly blows dealt to their opponents, each being like a proof of their truthfulness, their individual perfections, each one being like an indication of their righteousness, their veracious teachings, the strength of their faith, a witness to their honesty, their supreme seriousness and readiness to self-sacrifice, the sacred books and pages held by their hands, their countless pupils who, through following their paths, attain truth, perfection, and light, thus proving again the truthfulness of the teachings, the unanimous agreement of the prophets, those most earnest warners, and their followers in all positive matters, their concord, mutual support, and affinity. All of this constitutes so powerful a proof that no power on earth can confront it, and no doubt or hesitation can survive it. Our traveler understood further that inclusion of belief in all the prophets, peace be upon them, among the pillars of belief, represents another great source of strength. Thus he derived great benefit of faith from their lessons, in expression of which we said in the 8th degree of the first station, "There is no God but God, to the necessity of whose existence in unity points the unanimity of all the prophets, through the power of their luminous miracles, that both affirm and are affirmed." That questing traveler, having derived a lofty taste of truth from the power of belief, found himself invited, while coming from the assembly of the prophets, peace be upon them, to the classroom of those profound, original, exacting scholars, who affirm the claims of the prophets, peace be upon them, with the most decisive and powerful proofs, and who are known as the purified and most veracious ones. Entering their classroom, he saw thousands of geniuses and hundreds of thousands of exact and exalted scholars, proving all the affirmative matters connected with faith, headed by the necessity reality of God's existence and his unity with such profound demonstrations as to leave not the least room for doubt. Indeed, the fact that they are agreed in the principles and pillars of belief, despite their differences in capacity and outlook, and that each of them relies on a firm and certitudinous proof, is in itself such evidence that it can be doubted only if it is possible for a similar number of intelligent and perspicuous men to arrive at a single result. Otherwise, the only way for the denier to oppose them is to display his ignorance, his utter ignorance, and his obstinacy with respect to negative matters that admit neither of denial nor affirmation. He will in effect be closing his eyes, but the one who closes his eyes is able to turn day into night only for himself. The traveler learned that the lights emitted in this vast and magnificent classroom by these respected and profound scholars had been illumining half of the globe for more than 1,000 years. He found in it moral and spiritual force that the combined strength of all the people of denial would be unable to shake or destroy. In brief allusion to the lesson learned by the traveler in this classroom, we said in the 9th degree of the first station, "There is no God but God, to whose necessary existence in unity points the agreement of all of the purified scholars with the power of their resplendent, certain, and unanimous proofs." Our contemplative traveler came forth from the classroom, ardently desiring to see the lights that are to be observed in the continuous strengthening and development of faith, and in advancing from the degree of the knowledge of certainty to that of the vision of certainty. He then found himself summoned by thousands or millions of spiritual guides who were striving toward the truth and attaining the vision of certainty in the shade of the highway of Muhammad PBUH and the ascension of Muhammad PBUH. This they were doing in a meeting place, a hospice, a place of remembrance and preceptorship that was abundantly luminous and vast as a plain, being formed from the merging of countless small hospices and convents. Upon entering, he found that those spiritual guides, people of unveiling and wondrous deeds, were unanimously proclaiming no God but He, on the basis of their witnessing and unveiling of the unseen and the wondrous deeds they had been enabled to perform. They were proclaiming the necessary existence and unity of God. The traveler observed how manifest and clear must be a truth to which unanimously subscribed these sacred geniuses and luminous Gnostics. For like the sun is known through the 7 colors in its light, the saints' luminous colors, their light-filled hues, their true paths and right ways and veracious courses are manifested from the light of the pre-eternal sun, through 70 colors indeed, through colors to the number of the divine names, and are all different. He saw that the unanimity of the prophets and the agreement of the purified scholars and accord of the saints forms a supreme consensus, more brilliant than the daylight that demonstrates the existence of the sun. In brief allusion to the benefit derived by our traveler from the Sufi hospice, we said in the 10th degree of the first station, "There is no God but God, to whose necessary existence in unity points the unanimity of the saints in their manifest, well-affirmed and attested divinations of the truth and wondrous deeds." Now our traveler through the world, aware that the most important and greatest of all human perfections, indeed the very source and origin of all such perfections, is the love of God that arises from belief in God and the knowledge of God, wished with all of his powers, outer and inner, to advance still farther in the strengthening of his faith and the development of his knowledge. He therefore raised his head and gazing at the heavens said to himself, "The most precious thing in the universe is life. All things are made subordinate to life. The most precious of all living beings is the animate, and the most precious of the animate is the conscious. Each century and each year the globe is engaged in emptying and refilling itself in order to augment this most precious substance. It follows then, without doubt, that the magnificent and ornate heavens must have appropriate people and inhabitants possessing life, spirit, and consciousness for events relating to seeing and speaking with the angels, such as the appearance of Gabriel, peace be upon him, in the presence of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and in the view of the companions, have been transmitted and related from the most ancient times. Would then that I could converse with the inhabitants of the heavens and learn their thoughts on this matter, for their words concerning the creator of the cosmos are the most important." As he was thus thinking to himself, he suddenly heard a heavenly voice, "If you wish to meet us and hearken to our lesson, then know that before all others we have believed in the articles of faith brought by means of us to the prophets, headed by the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him who brought the Quran of miraculous exposition. Then too all of the pure spirits from among us that have appeared before men have unanimously and without exception borne witness to the necessary existence, the unity, and the sacred attributes of the creator of this cosmos, and proclaim this with one accord. The affinity and mutual correspondence of these countless proclamations is a guide for you as bright as the sun." Thus the traveler's light of faith shone and rose from the earth to the heavens. In brief allusion to the lesson learned by the traveler from the angels, we said in the 11th degree of the first station, There is no God but God, to whose necessary existence in unity points the unanimity of the angels that appear to human gaze, and who speak to the elect among men with their mutually corresponding and conforming messages. Then that ardent and inquisitive traveler, having learned from the tongues of various realms of creation in the manifest realm, in their material and corporeal aspects, and from the utterance of their modes of being, desired to study and journey through the world of the unseen and the intermediate realm, and thus to investigate reality. There opened to him the gate of upright and luminous intellects, of sound and illumined hearts, that are like the seed of man, who is the fruit of the universe, and despite their slight girth can expand virtually to embrace the whole of the cosmos. He looked and saw a series of human isthmuses linking the realm of the unseen with that of the manifest, and the contacts between those two realms and the interchanges between them insofar as they affect man, taking place at those points. Addressing his intellect and his heart, he said, "Come, the path leading to truth from these counterparts of yours is shorter. We should benefit by studying their qualities, natures, and colors concerning faith that we find here, not by listening to the lessons given by the tongues of disposition, as was previously the case." Beginning his study, he saw that the belief and firm conviction concerning the divine unity that all luminous intellects possessed, despite their varying capacities and differing, even opposing methods and outlooks, was the same, and that their steadfast and confident certainty and assurance was one. They had therefore to be relying on a single, unchanging truth. Their roots were sunk in a profound truth and could not be plucked out. Their unanimity concerning faith, the necessary existence and unity of God, was an unbreakable and luminous chain, a brightly lit window opening onto the world of the truth. He saw also that the unanimous, assured, and sublime unveilings and witnessings of the pillars of belief enjoyed by all those sound and luminous intellects, whose methods were various and outlooks divergent, corresponded to and agreed with each other on the matter of the divine unity. All those luminous hearts turned and joined to the truth, and manifesting it, each a small throne of dominical knowledge, a comprehensive mirror of God's eternal besoughtedness, were like so many windows opened onto the sun of the truth. Taken together, they were like a supreme mirror, like an ocean reflecting the sun. Their agreement and unanimity concerning the necessary existence and unity of God was an unfailing and reliable, most perfect guide, most elevated preceptor. For it is in no way possible or conceivable that a supposition other than the truth, an untrue thought, a false attribute, should so consistently and decisively be able to deceive simultaneously so many sharp eyes, or to induce illusion in them. Not even the foolish sophists who deny the cosmos would agree with the corrupt and dissipated intellect that held such a thing possible. All of this our traveler understood, and he said, together with his own intellect and heart, "I have believed in God." In brief allusion to the benefit derived from upright intellects and luminous hearts by our traveler, for knowledge of belief, we said in the 12th and 13th degrees of the first station, "There is no God but God, to whose necessary existence in unity points the consensus of all upright intellects, illumined with congruent beliefs and corresponding convictions and certainties, despite differences in capacity and outlook. There also points to his necessary existence in unity, the agreement of all sound, luminous hearts, with their mutually corresponding unveilings and their congruent witnessings, despite differences in method and manner." Then that traveler, looking closely at the world of the unseen, and voyaging in it with his intellect and his heart, knocked inquisitively on the door of that world, thinking to himself, "What does this world have to say?" The following occurred to him. It is to be clearly understood that behind the veil of the unseen is one who wants to make himself known through all these numerous finely adorned artifacts full of art in this corporeal manifest world, and to make himself loved through these infinite sweet and decorated bounties, and to make known his hidden perfections through these innumerable, miraculous, and skillful works of art, and who does this by act rather than speech, and by making himself known by the tongue of disposition. Since this is so, of a certainty he will speak and make himself known and loved through speech and utterance, just as he does through deed and state, in which case, from his manifestations, we must know him in respect to the world of the unseen. Whereupon he entered that world with his heart, and saw the following with the eye of his intellect. The truth of revelations prevails at all instants over all parts of the world of the unseen, with a most powerful manifestation. There comes with the truths of revelation and inspiration proceeding from the one all-knowing of the unseen, a testimony to his existence and unity far stronger than testimony of the universe and created beings. He does not leave himself, his existence and his unity, only to the testimony of his creatures. Rather, he speaks with a pre-eternal speech consonant with his own being. The speech of the one who is all-present and all-seeing everywhere with his knowledge and power is also endless. And just as the meaning of his speech makes him known, so does his discourse make himself known together with his attributes. The traveler recognized that the truth, reality, and existence of revelation has been made plain to the point of being self-evident by the consensus of 100,000 prophets, peace be upon them, by the agreement among their proclamations concerning the manifestation of divine revelation, by the evidences and miracles contained in the sacred books and heavenly pages, which are the guides and exemplars of the overwhelming majority of humanity, confirmed and assented to by them, and are the visible fruits of revelation. He understood further that the truth of revelation proclaims 5 sacred truths. The first, to speak in accordance with men's intellects and understandings, known as divine condescension to the minds of men, is a form of divine descent. It is a requirement of God's dominicality that he endows all of his conscious creatures with speech, understands their speech, and then participates in it with his own speech. The second, the one who, in order to make himself known, fills the cosmos with his miraculous creations and endows them with tongues speaking of his perfections, will necessarily make himself known with his own words also. The third, it is a function of his being creator to respond in words to the supplications and offerings of thanks that are made by the most select, the most needy, the most delicate, and the most ardent among his beings, true men. The fourth, the attribute of speech, an essential concomitant and luminous manifestation of both knowledge and life, will necessarily be found in a comprehensive and eternal form in the being whose knowledge is comprehensive and whose life is eternal. The fifth, it is a consequence of divinity that the being who endows men with impotence and desire, poverty and need, anxiety for the future, love and worship, should communicate his own existence by way of his speech to his most loved and lovable, his most anxious and needy creatures, who are most desirous of finding their Lord and Master. The evidences for the existence in unity of the necessary existent offered in unanimity by universal and heavenly revelations, which contain the truths of divine descent, dominical self-proclamation, compassionate response, divine conversation, and eternal self-communication, constitute a proof more powerful than the testimony for the existence of the sun brought by the rays of sunlight. Our traveler understood this, then looked in the direction of inspiration, and saw that veracious inspiration indeed resembles revelation in some respects and is a mode of dominical speech. The first, revelation, which is much higher than inspiration, generally comes by the medium of the angels, whereas inspiration generally comes directly. So too, a king has 2 modes of speech and command. The first consists of his sending to a governor a lieutenant equipped with all the pomp of monarchy and the splendor of sovereignty. Sometimes, in order to demonstrate the splendor of his sovereignty and the importance of his command, he may meet with the intermediary, and then the decree will be issued. The second consists of his speaking privately in his own person, not with the title of monarch or in the name of kingship, concerning some private matter, some petty affair, using for this purpose a trusted servant, some ordinary subject, or his private telephone. In the same way, the pre-eternal monarch may either, in the name of the sustainer of all the worlds, and with the title of creator of the universe, speak with revelation, or the comprehensive inspiration that performs the function of revelation, or he may speak in a different and private fashion, as the sustainer and creator of all animate beings, from behind the veil, in a way suited to the recipient. The second difference, revelation is without shadow, pure and reserved for the elect. Inspiration, by contrast, has shadow, colors intermingle with it, and it is general. There are numerous different kinds of inspiration, such as the inspiration of angels, the inspiration of men, and the inspiration of animals. Inspiration thus forms a field for the multiplication of God's words that are as numerous as the drops in the ocean. Our traveler understood that this matter is, indeed, a kind of commentary on the verse. Were the sea to become ink for the words of my sustainer, verily the sea would be exhausted before the words of my sustainer. Quran 18:109. Then he looked at the nature, the wisdom, and the testimony of inspiration, and saw that its nature, wisdom, and result were composed of 4 lights. The first, it is the result of God's lovingness and mercifulness that he makes himself loved through word, presence, and discourse, in the same way that he makes himself loved to his creatures through his deeds. The second, it is a requirement of his compassionateness, that just as he answers his servants' prayers, indeed, he should also answer them in word, from behind veils. The third, it is a concomitant of dominicality, that just as he responds indeed to the cries for help, supplications, and pleadings of those of his creatures who are afflicted with grievous misfortunes and hardships, so too he should hasten to their help with words of inspiration, which are like a form of speech. The fourth, God makes his existence, presence, and protection perceptible indeed to his most weak and indigent, his most poor and needy conscious creatures that stand in great need of finding their master, protector, guardian, and disposer. It is a necessary and essential consequence of his divine solicitousness and his dominical compassion that he should also communicate his presence and existence by speech from behind the veil of veracious inspiration, a mode of dominical discourse, to individuals in a manner peculiar to them and their capacities, through the telephone of their hearts. He then looked to the testimony of inspiration and saw that if the sun, for example, had consciousness and life, and if the 7 colors of sunlight were the 7 attributes, in that respect it would have a form of speech through the rays and manifestations found in its light. And in this situation, both its similitudes and reflections would be present in all transparent objects, and it would speak with all mirrors and shining objects and fragments of glass and bubbles and droplets of water, indeed with all transparent particles, in accordance with the capacity of each. It would respond to the needs of each, and all these would testify to the sun's existence, and no task would form an obstacle to any other task, and no speaking obstruct any other speaking. This is self-evident. In the same way, the speech of the glorious monarch of pre-eternity and post-eternity, the beauteous and exalted creator of all beings, who may be described as the pre-eternal Sun, manifests itself to all things in general and comprehensive fashion, in a manner appropriate to their capacity, as do also his knowledge and power. No request interferes with another, no task prevents the fulfillment of another, and no address becomes confused with another. All of this our traveler understood as self-evident. He knew that all of those manifestations, those discourses, those inspirations, separately and together, evidence and bore witness unanimously to the presence, the necessary existence, the unity and the oneness of that pre-eternal Son, with a knowledge of certainty that approached a vision of certainty. In brief allusion to the lesson, in knowledge of God from the world of the unseen gained by our inquisitive traveler, we said in the 14th and 15th degrees of the first station, there is no God but God, the necessary existent, the one, the single, to whose necessary existence in unity points the consensus of all true revelations, containing divine descent, glorious discourse, dominical self-revelation, compassionate response to the invocations of men, and eternal indications of his existence to his creatures. There points also to his necessary existence in unity the agreement of all veracious inspirations, containing expressions of God's love, compassionate responses to the prayers of God's creatures, dominical responses to the appeals of his servants for aid, and glorious intimations of his existence to his creatures. Then that traveler through the world addressed his own intellect, saying, since I am seeking my master and creator by means of the creatures of the cosmos, I ought before all else to visit the most celebrated of all these creatures, the greatest and most accomplished commander among them, according to the testimony even of his enemies, the most renowned ruler, the most exalted in speech, and the most brilliant in intellect, who has illuminated 14 centuries with his excellence and with his Quran, Muhammad the Arabian Prophet, may God's peace and blessings be upon him. In order thus to visit him and seek from him the answer to his quest, he entered the blessed age of the Prophet in his mind, and saw that age to be one of true felicity, thanks to that being, for through the light he had brought, he had turned the most primitive and illiterate of peoples into the masters and teachers of the world. He said too to his own intellect, before asking him concerning our Creator, we should first learn that value of this extraordinary being, the veracity of his words and the truthfulness of his warnings. Thus he began investigating, and of the numerous conclusive proofs that he found, we will briefly indicate here only 9 of the most general ones. The first, all excellent qualities and characteristics were to be found in that extraordinary being, according to the testimony even of his enemies. Hundreds of miracles were made manifest at his hands, according to explicit Quranic verses or traditions enjoying the status of tawatur. Tawatur is the kind of report transmitted by numerous authorities, about which there is no room for doubt. Tata. Examples of these miracles are his splitting of the moon and the moon split. Yujoshtoam Borul Quran 54:1 with a single indication of his finger, his casting of a handful of dust into the eyes of his enemies, causing them to flee. It was not your act when you threw, but God's. Yudbun Quran 8:17, and his giving his thirsting army to drink from the water that flowed forth from his 5 fingers like the spring of Kauthar. Since some of those miracles, numbering more than 300, have been set forth with decisive proofs in the remarkable and wondrous work known as the Miracles of Muhammad, the 19th letter, we leave discussion of the miracles to that work and permit the traveler to continue speaking. A being who, in addition to noble characteristics and perfections, has all these luminous miracles to demonstrate, must certainly be the most truthful in speech of all men. It is inconceivable that he would stoop to trickery, lies, and error, the deeds of the vile. The second, He holds in his hand a decree from the Lord of the universe, a decree accepted and affirmed in each century by more than 300 million people. This decree, the Quran of mighty stature, is wondrous in 7 different ways. The fact that the Quran has 40 different aspects of miraculousness and that it is the word of the Creator of all beings has been set forth in detail with strong proofs in the 25th word, the miraculousness of the Quran, a celebrated treatise that is like the sun of the Risale-i Nur. We therefore leave such matters to that work and listen to the traveler as he says, there can never be any possibility of lying on the part of the being who is the conveyor and proclaimer of this decree, for that would be a violation of the decree and treachery toward the one who issued it. The third, such a sacred law, an Islam, a code of worship, a cause, a summons, and a faith, did that being bring forth that the like of them does not exist, nor could it exist, nor does a more perfect form of them exist, nor could it exist. For the law appearing with that unlettered being has no rival in its administration of 1/5 of humanity for 14 centuries, in a just and precise manner through its numerous injunctions. Moreover, the Islam that emerged from the deeds, sayings, and inward states of that unlettered being has no peer, nor can it have, for in each century it has been for 300 million men a guide and a refuge, the teacher and educator of their intellects, and the illuminator and purifier of their hearts, the cause for the refinement and training of their souls, and the source of progress and advancement of their spirits. The Prophet is similarly unparalleled in the way in which he was the foremost in practicing all the forms of worship found in his religion, and the first in piety and the fear of God, in his observing the duties of worship fully and with attention to their profoundest dimensions, even while engaged in constant struggle and activity, in his practice of worship, combining in perfect fashion the beginning and end of worship and servitude to God without imitation of anyone. With the Jawshan al-Kabir, from among his thousands of supplicatory prayers and invocations, he describes his sustainer with such a degree of gnosis that all the Gnostics and saints who have come after him have been unable, with their joint efforts, to attain a similar degree of gnosis and accurate description. This shows that in prayer too, he is without peer. Whoever looks at the section at the beginning of the treatise on supplicatory prayer, which sets forth some part of the meaning of one of the 99 sections of the Jawshan al-Kabir, will say that the Jawshan too has no peer. In his conveying of the message and his summoning men to the truth, he displayed such steadfastness, firmness, and courage that although great states and religions, and even his own people, tribe, and uncle, opposed him in the most hostile fashion, he exhibited not the slightest trace of hesitation, anxiety, or fear. The fact that he successfully challenged the whole world and made Islam the master of the world likewise proves that there is not and cannot be anyone like him in his conveying of the message and summons. In his faith, he had so extraordinary a strength, so marvelous a certainty, so miraculous a breadth, and so exalted a conviction, illumining the whole world, that none of the ideas and beliefs then dominating the world, and none of the philosophies of the sages and teachings of the religious leaders was able, despite extreme hostility and denial, to induce in his certainty, conviction, trust, and assurance the slightest doubt, hesitation, weakness, or anxiety. Moreover, the saintly of all ages, headed by the companions, the foremost in the degrees of belief, have all drawn on his fountain of belief and regarded him as representing the highest degree of faith. This proves that his faith too is matchless. Our traveler therefore concluded and affirmed with his intellect that lying and duplicity have no place in the one who has brought such a unique sacred law, such an unparalleled Islam, such a wondrous devotion to worship, such an extraordinary excellence in supplicatory prayer, such a universally acclaimed summons to the truth, and such a miraculous faith, the fourth. In the same way that the consensus of the prophets is a strong proof for the existence and unity of God, so too it is a firm testimony to the truthfulness and messengerhood of this being. For all the sacred attributes, miracles, and functions that indicate the truthfulness and messengerhood of the prophets, peace be upon them, existed in full measure in that being according to the testimony of history. The prophets have verbally predicted the coming of that being and given good tidings thereof in the Torah, the Gospels, the Psalms, and the pages. More than 20 of the most conclusive examples of these glad tidings, drawn from the scriptures, have been set forth and proven in the 19th letter. Similarly, through all the deeds and miracles associated with their prophethood, they have affirmed and, as it were, put their signature to the mission of that being, which is the foremost and most perfect in the tasks and functions of prophethood. Just as through verbal consensus they indicate the divine unity, through the unanimity of their deeds they bear witness to the truthfulness of that being. This too was understood by our traveler. The fifth, similarly, the thousands of saints who have attained truth, reality, perfection, wondrous deeds, unveiling and witnessing through the instruction of this being and following him, bear unanimous witness not only to the divine unity but also to the truthfulness and messengerhood of this being. Again, the fact that they witness through the light of sainthood some of the truths he proclaimed proclaimed concerning the world of the unseen, and that they believe in and affirm all of those truths through the light of belief, either with knowledge of certainty, or with the vision of certainty, or with absolute certainty. He saw that this too demonstrates, like the sun, the degree of truthfulness and rectitude of that great being, their master. The sixth, the millions of purified, sincere, and punctilious scholars and faithful sages who have reached the highest station of learning through the teaching and instruction contained in the sacred truths brought by that being, despite his unlettered nature, the exalted sciences he invented, and divine knowledge he discovered, they not only prove and affirm unanimously and with the strongest proofs the divine unity which is the foundation of his mission, but also bear unanimous witness to the truthfulness of this supreme teacher and great master, and to the veracity of his words. This is a proof as clear as daylight. The Risale-i Nur too, with its 100 parts, is but a single proof of his truthfulness. The seventh, the family and companions of the Prophet, who with their insight, knowledge, and spiritual accomplishment are the most renowned, the most respected, the most celebrated, the most pious, and the most keen-sighted of men, after the Prophets, examined and scrutinized with the utmost attention, seriousness, and exactitude all the states, thoughts, and conditions of this being, whether hidden or open. They came to the unanimous conclusion that he was the most truthful, exalted, and honest being in the world, and this, their unshakable affirmation and firm belief, is a proof like the daylight attesting the reality of the sun. The eighth, the cosmos indicates its maker, inscriber, and designer, who creates, administers, and arranges it, and through determining its measure and form and regulating it, has disposal over it as though it was a palace, a book, an exhibition, a spectacle. And so too it indicates that it requires and necessitates an elevated herald, a truthful unveiler, a learned master, and a truthful teacher, who will know and make known the divine purposes in the universe's creation, teach the dominical instances of wisdom in its changes and transformations, give instruction in the results of its dutiful motions, proclaim its essential value and the perfections of the beings within it, and express the meanings of that mighty book. It indicates that he is certain to exist. Thus the traveler knew that it testified to the truthfulness of this being who performed these functions better than anyone, and to his being a most elevated and loyal official of the universe's creator. The ninth, there is behind the veil one who wishes to demonstrate with these ingenious and wise artifacts the perfection of his talent and art, to make himself known and loved by means of these countless adorned and decorated creations, to evoke praise and thanks through the unnumbered pleasurable and valuable bounties that he bestows, to cause men to worship him with gratitude and appreciation in the face of his dominicality, through his solicitous and protective sustenance of life, and his provision of nurture and bounty in such manner as to satisfy the most delicate of tastes and appetites, to manifest his divinity through the change of seasons, the alternation of night and day, and through all his magnificent and majestic deeds, all his awe-inspiring and wise acts and creativity, and thereby to cause men to believe in his divinity in submission, humility, and obedience, and to demonstrate his justice and truthfulness by at all times protecting virtue and the virtuous, and destroying evil and the evil by annihilating with blows from heaven the oppressor and the liar. There will of a certainty be at the side of this unseen being his most beloved creature and most devoted bondsman, who, serving the purposes that have just been mentioned, discovers and unravels the talisman and riddle of the creation of the universe, who acts always in the name of that creator, who seeks aid and success from him, and who receives them from him, Muhammad of Quraysh, peace and blessings be upon him. The traveler further said, addressing his own intellect, since these 9 truths bear witness to the truthfulness of this being, he must be the source of glory of mankind and the source of honor for the world. If we therefore call him the pride of the world and glory of the sons of Adam, it will be fitting. The fact that the awesome sovereignty of that decree of the compassionate one, the Quran of miraculous exposition that he holds in his hand, has conquered half the world, together with his individual perfections and exalted virtues, shows that he is the most important personage in the world. The most important word concerning our Creator is that which he utters. Now see, the foundation of the summons of this extraordinary being and the aim of all his life, based on the strength furnished by his hundreds of decisive and evident and manifest miracles, and the thousands of exalted fundamental truths contained in his religion, was to prove and bear witness to the existence of the necessary existent, his unity, attributes, and names, to affirm, proclaim, and announce him. He is therefore like a sun in the cosmos, the most brilliant proof of our Creator, this being whom we call the beloved of God. There are 3 forms of great and infallible consensus, each of which affirms, confirms, and puts its signature to the witness he bears. The first, the unanimous affirmation made by that luminous assembly, known and celebrated throughout the world as the family of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, including thousands of Poles and supreme saints of penetrating gaze and ability to perceive the unseen, such as Imam Ali, may God be pleased with him, who said, "Were the veil to be lifted, my certainty would not increase," and Abd al-Qadir al-Gilani, the Khawth al-A'zam, may his mystery be sanctified, who saw the supreme throne and the awesome form of Israfil while yet on the earth. The second, the confirmation made with a strong faith that permitted men to sacrifice their lives and their property, their fathers and tribes, by the renowned assembly known as the Companions, who found themselves among a primitive people and in an unlettered environment, devoid of all social life and political thought, without any scripture, and lost in the darkness of a period between prophets, and who in a very brief time came to be the masters, guides, and just rulers of the most civilized and politically and socially advanced peoples and states, and to rule the world from east to west in universally approved fashion. The third, the confirmation provided with unanimous and certain knowledge by that lofty group of punctilious and profound scholars, of whom in each age thousands spring forth, who advance in wondrous fashion in every science and work in different fields. Thus, the testimony brought by this being to the divine unity is not particular and individual, but general and universal and unshakable. If all the demons that exist were to unite, they could not challenge it. Such was the conclusion reached by the traveler. In reference to the lesson learned in the school of light by that traveler from the world, that wayfarer in life, when he visited in his mind the blessed age of the Prophet, we said at the end of the 16th degree of the first station, there is no God but God, the necessary existent, the one, the unique, the necessity of whose existence in unity is indicated by the pride of the world and the glory of the sons of Adam, through the majesty of the sovereignty of his Quran, the splendor of the expanse of his religion, the multiplicity of his perfections, and the exaltedness of his characteristics, as confirmed even by the testimony of his enemies. He bears witness and brings proof through the strength of his hundreds of manifest and evident miracles that both testify to truth and are themselves the object of true testimony, and through the strength of the thousands of luminous and conclusive truths contained in his religion, according to the consensus of all the possessors of light, the agreement of his illumined companions, and the unanimity of the scholars of his community, the possessors of proofs and luminous insight. The tireless and insatiable traveler, who knew the aim of life in this world and the essence of life to be faith, addressed his own heart and said, "Let us examine the book known as the Quran of miraculous exposition, which is said to be the word and utterance of the being whom we are seeking, the most famous, the most brilliant and wisest book in the world, that issues a challenge in every age to whoever refuses to submit to it. Let us see what it says. But first, we must establish that this book is from our Creator." And he began to search. Since the traveler lived in the present age, he looked first at the Risale-i Nur, flashes from the miraculousness of the Quran. He saw its 130 parts to consist of luminous points drawn from that book of discernment, or well-founded explanations of its contents. Even though the Risale-i Nur is valiantly struggling to diffuse the truths of the Quran in all directions, in this obstinate and atheistic age, no one can defeat it, which proves that its master, its source, its authority, and its son is the Quran, heavenly, not human speech. Among the hundreds of proofs in the different parts of the Risale-i Nur, the single proof contained in the 25th word and the end of the 19th letter establishes 40 aspects of the Quran's miraculousness in such a way that whoever sees it, far from uttering any criticism or objection, admires its arguments and utters appreciative praise. The traveler left it to the Risale-i Nur to prove that the Quran is miraculous and the true word of God, turning only to a brief indication of a few points showing its greatness. First point, just as the Quran with all its miracles and truths indicating its veracity is a miracle of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, so too Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, with all his miracles, proofs of prophethood and perfections of knowledge, is a miracle of the Quran and a decisive proof of the Quran's being the word of God. Second point, the Quran in this world brought about in so luminous, felicitous, and truthful a fashion a revolution in the social life of man, as well as in the souls, hearts, spirits, and intellects of men, in their individual, social, and political lives, and having caused this revolution, perpetuated it in such a fashion that for 14 centuries at every moment its 6,666 verses have been read by the tongues of more than 100 million men, training them, refining their souls, and purifying their hearts. To spirits, it has been a means of development and advancement. To intellects, an orientation and light. To life, it has been life itself and felicity. Such a book is of a certainty unparalleled. It is a wonder, a marvel, and a miracle. Third point, The Quran, from that age down to the present, has demonstrated such eloquence that it caused the value attached to the odes known as 7 hanging poems that were written in gold on the walls of the Kaaba to descend to such a point that the daughter of Labid, when taking down her father's poem from the Kaaba, said, "Compared with the verses of the Quran, this no longer has any value." A Bedouin poet heard this verse being recited, "Therefore expound openly what you are commanded." Yeah, Quran 1594, and immediately prostrated. They asked him, "Have you become a Muslim?" "No," he replied, "I was prostrating before the eloquence of this verse." Thousands of scholars and litterateurs, like geniuses of the science of rhetoric such as Abd al-Kahir Jurjani, Sakaki, and Zamakhshari, have unanimously decided that the eloquence of the Quran is beyond human capacity and is unattainable. The Quran has also, from that time forward, invited to the field of combat all arrogant and egoistic litterateurs and rhetoricians, and said to them in a manner calculated to break their arrogance, "Come, produce a single surah like it, or else accept perdition and humiliation in this world and the hereafter." Despite this challenge, the obstinate rhetoricians of that age abandoned the short path of producing a single surah like the Quran, and instead chose the long path of casting their persons and property into danger. This proves that the short path cannot be taken. Millions of Arabic books are in circulation, some written by friends of the Quran in order to resemble and imitate it, others written by its enemies in order to confront and criticize it. Not one of them has been able to attain the level of the Quran. Should a common man even listen to them, he is sure to say, "The Quran does not resemble these other books, nor is it in the same class as they. It must be either below them or above them. No one, no unbeliever or fool in the world can say that it is below them. Hence its degree of eloquence is above all of them." Once a man read the verse, "All that is in the heavens and the earth extols and glorifies God," Quran 57:1, he said, "I cannot see any miraculous eloquence in this verse." He was told, "Go back to that age like the traveler and listen to the verse as recited there." Imagining himself to be there before the revelation of the Quran, he saw that all the beings in the world were living in an unstable, transient world, in empty, infinite, and unbounded space, in confusion and darkness, lifeless, and without consciousness and purpose. Suddenly, he heard this verse proclaimed by the tongue of the Quran, and the verse removed a veil from in front of the universe and illumined the face of the globe. This pre-eternal speech, this eternal decree, gave instruction to all conscious beings drawn up in the ranks of succeeding centuries in such fashion that the cosmos became like a vast mosque. All of creation, headed by the heavens and the earth, was engaged in vital remembrance of God and proclamation of His glory, was joyously and contentedly fulfilling its function. All of this our traveler observed. Thus, tasting the degree of the eloquence of the Quran and comparing the other verses to it by analogy, he understood one of the many thousands of wise reasons for the conquest of half the globe and a fifth of humanity by the eloquent murmuring of the Quran for the uninterrupted continuance of its respected and magnificent monarchy for 14 centuries. Fourth point, the Quran has demonstrated such a voracious sweetness that whereas the repetition of even the sweetest thing induces disgust, it has from earliest times been accepted by everyone and even become proverbial that repeated recitation of the Quran, far from inducing disgust and weariness in men of sound heart and pure taste, on the contrary increases its sweetness. The Quran demonstrates, moreover, such a freshness, youth, and originality that even though it has lived for 14 centuries and passed through many hands, it retains its freshness as if it had only just been revealed. Every century sees the Quran enjoying a new youth, as if it were addressing that century in particular. Similarly, scholars of every branch of learning, even though they keep the Quran constantly at their side in order to benefit from it and perpetually follow its method of exposition, see that the Quran maintains the originality of its style and manner of explanation. Fifth point. One wing of the Quran is in the past, and one is in the future, and like its root and one wing are the agreed truths of the former prophets, and it confirms and corroborates them, and they too confirm it with the tongue of unanimity. So too all the true Sufi paths and ways of sainthood, whose fruits, like the saints and purified scholars who receive life from the Quran, show through their vital spiritual progress that their blessed tree is living, effulgent, and the means to truth, and who grow and live under the protection of its second wing, testify that the Quran is pure truth and the assembly of truths, and in its comprehensiveness a matchless wonder. Sixth point. The Quran's truthfulness and veracity show that its 6 aspects are luminous. Indeed, the pillars of argument and proof beneath it, the flashes of the stamp of miraculousness above it, the gifts of happiness in this world and the next before it, its goal, the truths of heavenly revelation, the point of support behind it, the assent and evidence of innumerable upright minds to its right, and the true tranquility, sincere attraction, and submission of sound hearts and clean consciences on its left, all prove that the Quran is a wondrous, firm, unassailable citadel of both the heavens and the earth. So too from these 6 levels, the disposer of the universe has set his seal on its being sheer truth and right, and not being man's word, and its containing no error. The disposer, who has made it his practice to always exhibit beauty in the universe, protect good and right, and eliminate impostors and liars, has confirmed and set his seal on the Quran by giving it the most acceptable, highest, and most dominant place of respect and degree of success in the world. And so too the one who is the source of Islam and interpreter of the Quran, his believing in it and holding it in greater respect than everyone else, and being in a sleep-like state when it was revealed. Muslim AV knows 1816, 1817. Al-Hakim Al-Mustadrak, Sadai, 392. Tabrizi Mishkat Al-Masabi, number 4844. And other words and speeches not resembling or coming near it, and that interpreters describing without hesitation and with complete confidence through the Quran true cosmic events of generally the past and the future from behind the veil of the unseen, and no trickery or fault being observed in him while being under the gazes of the sharpest eyes, and his believing and affirming every pronouncement of the Quran with all his strength and nothing shaking him, is a stamp confirming that the Quran is revealed and true, and the blessed word of his own compassionate Creator. Also a fifth of mankind, indeed the greater part of it, being drawn to the Quran and bound to it in religion, and giving ear to it eagerly desirous of the truth, and according to the testimony of many indications and events and illuminations, the jinn, angels, and spirit beings also gathering around it in truth, worshipping fashion like moths whenever it is recited. Washi Bukhari Vi 234, Al-Mustadrak I 553, 554. Is a stamp confirming the Quran's acceptance by all beings and that it occupies a most high position. Also, all the classes of mankind, from the most stupid and lowly to the cleverest and most learned, taking their full share of the Quran's instruction and their understanding its most profound truths, and all branches of scholars, like the great interpreters of the greater Sharia in particular, and hundreds of Islamic sciences and branches of knowledge, and the brilliant and exacting scholars of theology and the principles of religion, extracting from the Quran all the needs and answers for their own sciences, is a stamp confirming that the Quran is a source of truth and mine of reality. Also, although the Arab literary figures, who were the most advanced in regard to literature, those of them who were not Muslims, had the greatest need to dispute the Quran, their avoiding producing the like of only a single surah, and its eloquence being only one aspect of the 7 major aspects of the Quran's miraculousness, as well as the famous orators and brilliant scholars up to the present who have wanted to gain fame through disputing it, being unable to oppose a single aspect of its miraculousness, and their remaining silent in impotence, is a stamp confirming that the Quran is a miracle and beyond the powers of man. Yes, the value, superiority, and eloquence of a speech or word is apparent through knowing from whom it has come and to whom and for what purpose. The Quran then can have no like, and none can reach it. For the Quran is a speech and address of the sustainer of all the worlds and creator of the whole universe, and a dialogue in no way hinting of imitation and artificiality. It is addressed to the one sent in the name of all men, indeed of all beings, the most famous and renowned of mankind, the strength and breadth of whose belief gave rise to mighty Islam, and raised its owner to the level of the distance of 2 bowstrings, and returned him as the addressee of the eternally besought one. It describes and explains the matters concerning happiness in this world and the next, the results of the creation of the universe, and the dominical purposes within it. It expounds also the belief of the one it addresses, which was the highest and most extensive of belief, and bore all the truths of Islam. It turns and shows every side of the huge universe like a map, a clock, or a house, and teaches and describes it in the manner of the craftsmen who made them. To produce the like of this Quran of miraculous exposition is not possible. The degree of its miraculousness cannot be attained to. Also, thousands of precise and learned scholars of high intelligence have each written commentaries expounding the Quran, some of which are of 30, 40, or even 70 volumes, showing and proving through evidence and argument the innumerable qualities, fine points, characteristics, mysteries, elevated meanings, and numerous indications concerning every sort of hidden and unseen matter in the Quran, and the 130 parts of the Risale-i Nur in particular, each of which proves with decisive arguments one quality, one fine point of the Quran. Each part of it, like the miraculousness of the Quran and the second station of the 20th word, which deduces many things from the Quran concerning the wonders of civilization, like the railway and the aeroplane, and the first ray, called signs of the Quran, which makes known the indications of verses alluding to the Risale-i Nur and electricity, and the 8 short treatises called the 8 symbols, which show how well ordered, full of meaning, and mysterious are the words of the Quran, and the small treatise proving in 5 aspects the miraculousness of the verses at the end of Surah Al-Fath in regard to their their giving news of the unseen. Each part of the Risale-i Nur shows one truth, one light of the Quran. All this forms a stamp confirming that the Quran has no like, is a miracle and a marvel, and that it is the tongue of the world of the unseen in the manifest world and the word of one all-knowing of the unseen. Thus, due to these qualities and characteristics of the Quran indicated above in 6 points, 6 aspects and 6 levels, its sublime, luminous sovereignty and sacred, mighty rule has continued with perfect splendor, illuminating the faces of the centuries and the face of the earth for 1,300 years. And also, on account of these qualities of the Quran, each of its letters has gained the sacred distinction of yielding at least 10 rewards, 10 merits, and 10 eternal fruits, and the letters of certain verses and surahs yielding 100 or 1,000 fruits, or even more, and at blessed times the light, reward, and value of each letter rising from 10 to hundreds. The traveler through the world understood this, and said to his heart, the Quran, which is thus miraculous in every respect, through the consensus of its surahs, the agreement of its verses, the accord of its lights and mysteries, and the concurrence of its fruits and works, so testifies with its evidences in the form of proofs to the existence, unity, attributes, and names of a single, necessarily existent one, that it is from its testimony that the endless testimony of all the believers has issued forth. Thus, in brief allusion to the instruction in belief and divine unity that the traveler received from the Quran, it was said in the 17th degree of the first station, there is no God but God, the one and unique necessary existent, to whose necessary existence in unity points the Quran of miraculous exposition, the book accepted and desired by all species of angel, men, and jinn, whose verses are read each minute of the year with the utmost reverence by hundreds of millions of men, whose sacred sovereignty over the regions of the earth and the universe and the face of time is permanent, whose spiritual and luminous authority has run over half the earth and a fifth of humanity for more than 14 centuries with the utmost splendor. Testimony and proof is also given by the unanimity of its sacred and heavenly surahs, the agreement of its luminous divine verses, the congruence of its mysteries and light, the correspondence of its fruits and effects by witnessing and clear vision. Our traveler, our voyager through life, knew now that faith is the most precious capital man can have, for it bestows on indigent man not some transient and ephemeral field or dwelling, but a palace, indeed an eternal kingdom, as vast as the whole cosmos or the world itself. Faith also bestows on ephemeral man all he will need for life eternal, delivers from eternal annihilation wretched man who waits on the gallows for the arrival of fate, and opens to man an eternal treasury of everlasting felicity. The traveler then said to himself, onward, in order to gain a further degree from among the infinite degrees of faith, let us refer to the totality of the cosmos and listen to what it says. We will then be able to perfect and illumine the lessons we have received from its components and parts. Looking through the broad and comprehensive telescope he had taken from the Quran, he saw the cosmos to be so meaningful and well ordered that it took on the shape of an embodied book of the glorious one, an incarnate dominical Quran, a finely adorned palace of the eternally besought one, an orderly city of the most merciful. All the surahs, verses, and words of that book of the universe, even its very letters, chapters, divisions, pages, and lines, through their constant meaningful effacement and reaffirmation, their wise changes and alternations, gave unanimous expression to the existence and presence of one who has knowledge of all things and power over all things, as the author of the book, of a glorious inscriber and a perfect scribe, seeing all things in all things and knowing the relationship of all things with all things. So too all the species and particles of the cosmos, all its inhabitants and contents, all that enters it and leaves it, all the providential changes and the wise processes of rejuvenation that occur in it, these proclaim in unison the existence and unity of an exalted craftsman, a peerless maker, who sets to work with limitless power and infinite wisdom. The testimony of two great and vast truths, of a piece with the immensity of the cosmos, affirms this supreme witness of the cosmos. First truth. These are the truths of createdness and contingency, established with countless proofs by the gifted scholars of the principles of religion and the science of theology, as well as the sages of Islam. They said that since change and mutation are to be observed in the world and all things, the world must be ephemeral and created. It cannot be uncreated. If it is created, then there must be a maker who created it, and if there is no cause to be found in the essence of a thing, either for its being or for its non-being, so that these two are equally possible, that thing cannot be necessary and eternal. It has further been proven with decisive arguments that it is not possible for things to create each other, since that would involve the absurd and false notion of causality and never-ending causal sequences. Hence the existence of a necessary existence becomes necessary, whose like cannot exist, whose similitude is impossible, all other than whom is contingent and created by him. Yes, the truth of createdness has permeated the whole of the cosmos, and many instances of it are visible to the eye. The rest can be seen only by the intellect. For in front of our eyes a whole world dies every autumn, and together with it die hundreds of thousands of different kinds of plants and small animals, each member of each species being like a small cosmos unto himself. It is, however, so orderly and disciplined a death that all things leave behind in their places seeds and eggs that in the spring shall be the means of resurrection and rebirth. Miracles of mercy and wisdom, miracles of power and knowledge. They hand to the seeds and eggs their book of deeds and plan of action, entrusting them to the wisdom of the glorious preserver and under his protection, and only then do they die. In spring, the dead trees, roots, and animals come to life again exactly as they were, thus providing hundreds of thousands of examples, specimens, and proofs of the supreme resurrection. In the place of others, plants and animals resembling them exactly are brought into being, and life, thus publishing the pages of the beings of the preceding spring, together with their deeds and functions, just like an advertisement. Thus they demonstrate one meaning of the verse when the pages are spread out. Quran 81:10. Quran 81. Then also, with respect to the whole, each autumn a great world dies, and each spring a fresh world comes into being. That death and creation proceed in so orderly a manner, and so many separate deaths and creations occur within them in such orderly and regular fashion, that it is as if the world were a traveller's lodge, where animate beings reside for a time, where travelling worlds and migrant realms come, fulfill their duties, and then go on their way. So there is apparent to all intellect, with the clarity of the sun, the necessary existence, infinite power, and unending wisdom of a glorious being who creates and brings into being in this world vital realms and purposive universes, with perfect wisdom, knowledge, and equilibrium, with balance, order, and regularity, and who then employs them for dominical purposes, divine aims, and merciful goals, with full power and compassion. We leave to the Risale-i Nur and the books of the theologians the further discussion of matters related to createdness. As for contingence, it prevails over and surrounds all of the cosmos, for we see that all things, universal or particular, big or small, from God's throne down to the ground, from the atom to the planet, all are sent to the world with a particular essence, a specific form, a distinct identity, particular attributes, wise qualities, and beneficial organs. Now, to bestow on that particular essence and quiddity its peculiarities from amongst the infinite possibilities available, to clothe it in its specific, distinctive, and appropriate form from among the possibilities and probabilities that are as numerous as the forms that may be conceived, to distinguish that being with the identity suited to it from among the possibilities as numerous as the other members of its species, to endow with special, suitable, and beneficial attributes the created object that is formless and hesitant midst the possibilities and probabilities that are as numerous as the varieties of attribute and degree, to affix to that aimless creature, perplexed and distraught amidst the innumerable possibilities and probabilities that result from the infinitude of conceivable paths and modalities, to affix to it wise qualities and beneficial organs, and equip it with them. All of these are indications, proofs, and affirmations to the number of the innumerable possibilities of the necessary existence, infinite power, and unlimited wisdom of the necessary existent, who creates, chooses, specifies, and distinguishes the quiddity and identity, the form and shape, the attribute and situation of all contingent beings, whether they be universals or particulars. They indicate, too, that no object and no matter is hidden from him, that nothing is difficult for him, that the greatest task is as easy for him as the smallest, that he can create a spring as easily as a tree, and a tree as easily as a seed. All this, then, pertains to the truth of contingence, and forms one wing of the great testimony borne by the cosmos. Since the testimony of the cosmos, with its two wings and two truths, is fully established and explained in various parts of the Risale-i Nur, and particularly the 22nd and 32nd words, as well as the 20th and 33rd letters, we refer our readers to those writings and cut short an extremely long story. Second truth. As for the second truth that proceeds from the total scheme of the cosmos, which is also the second wing of its great and universal testimony, it is as follows. There is to be seen a truth of cooperation among these beings that are attempting to maintain their existence, and if they are animate their life and fulfill their functions in the midst of constantly stirring changes and revolutions, a truth that lies far beyond their capacities. For example, the elements hasten to aid animate beings, the clouds to help the vegetable kingdom to help the animal kingdom to help the human kingdom. Milk gushes forth from the breast like the spring of paradise to succor the infant. The fact that animate beings are given their needs and sustenance in a manner that transcends their capacity from unexpected places. The replenishing of the cells of the body with particles of food through their being subjugated by their sustainer and their employment at his merciful hands. All of these and numerous other examples of the truth of cooperation demonstrate the universal and compassionate dominicality of the sustainer of all the worlds, who administers the cosmos like a palace. Solid, inanimate, and unfeeling objects that nonetheless cooperate with each other in a sensitive and conscious fashion must of necessity be caused to rush to each other's aid by the power, mercy, and command of a compassionate, wise, and glorious sustainer. The universal cooperation visible throughout the cosmos, the comprehensive equilibrium and all-embracing preservation prevailing with the utmost regularity in all things, from the planets to the members, limbs and bodily particles of animate beings, the adorning whose pen ranges over the gilded face of the heavens, the decorated face of the earth, and the delicate faces of flowers, the ordering that prevails over all things, from the Milky Way and solar system down to fruits such as corn and pomegranates, the assigning of duties to all things, from the sun and the moon, the elements and the clouds, down to honeybees. All of these great truths offer a testimony of proportionate greatness, and their testimony forms the second wing of the testimony offered by the cosmos. Since the Risale-i Nur has established and clarified this great testimony, we will content ourselves here with this brief indication. In brief allusion to the lesson of faith learned by our traveler from the cosmos, we said in the 18th degree of the first station, "There is no God but God, the necessary existent, the like of whom cannot exist, other than whom all things are contingent, the one, the unique, to the necessity of whose existence in unity points the cosmos, the great book incarnate, the supreme Quran personified, the ornate and orderly palace, the splendid and well-arranged city, with all of its surahs, verses, letters, chapters, parts, pages and lines, with the agreement of its fundaments, species, parts and particles, its inhabitants and contents, what enters it and what leaves it, with the testimony of the sublimity of the comprehensiveness of the truth of createdness, change and contingency, with the consensus of all scholars of the science of theology, with the testimony of the truth of the changing of its form and its contents, with wisdom and regularity, and the renewal of its letters and words with discipline and equilibrium, and with the testimony of the sublimity of the comprehensiveness of the truth of co-operation, mutual response and solidarity, reciprocal care, balance and preservation among all its beings, as is to be clearly observed. Then the ardent and inquisitive traveler, who was seeking the creator of the world, had advanced by gaining knowledge of God indirectly through 18 degrees, and approached, at the end of an ascension in belief to the throne of truth, a station where, in the presence of God, he addressed him directly. He said to his own spirit, in the noble opening surah of the Quran, the verses that extend from the beginning to the word Iyaka, you alone, are like a form of praise and encomium uttered indirectly. But the word Iyaka signifies a coming into his presence and addressing him directly. So too we should abandon this indirect seeking and ask for the object of search from the object of our search. For one must ask the sun that shows all things concerning the sun, since that which shows all things will show itself even more clearly. Just as we perceive and know the sun by its rays, so too we can strive to know our Creator, in accordance with our capacities, through His most beautiful names and sacred attributes. We will set forth here, with the utmost brevity and concision, two of the countless paths that lead to this goal, two of the infinite degrees of those two paths, and two of the abundant truths and details of those two degrees. The first truth: there appears visible to our eye a comprehensive, permanent, orderly, and awesome truth, one that changes, transforms, and renews all beings in heaven and on earth with imperious and incessant activity. Within the truth of that in every way wise activity, there is immediately perceived the truth of the manifestation of dominicality, and in turn, within the truth of that in every way merciful manifestation of dominicality, is recognizable the truth of the epiphany of divinity. From this continuous, wise, and imperious activity, the deeds of an all-powerful and all-knowing doer can be discerned as if from behind a veil, and from behind the veil of these nurturing and administering deeds of dominicality, the divine names manifest in all things can be immediately perceived. Then behind the veil of the beautiful names manifest with glory and beauty can be deduced the existence and reality of the 7 sacred attributes according to the testimony of all creation, in a life-giving, powerful, knowledgeable, all-hearing, all-seeing, volitional, and speech-endowed form. There appears to the eye of faith in the heart, self-evidently, necessarily, and with full certainty, the existence of a necessary existent that is described by these attributes, a single one of unity known by these names, a peerless and eternal doer, in a form more evidential and brilliant than the sun. For a beautiful and profound book necessarily presupposes the act of writing, and a well-built house presupposes the act of building, and the acts of writing beautifully and building well presuppose the names of writer and builder, and the titles of writer and builder obviously imply the arts and attributes of writing and building, and these arts and attributes self-evidently necessitate one who will be qualified by the names and attributes and be the artist and craftsman. For just as it is impossible for there to be a deed without a doer, or a name without one designated by the name, so too it is not possible for there to be an attribute without one qualified by the attribute, and for there to be a craft without a craftsman. On the basis, then, of this truth and principle, the universe with all the beings it contains resembles a collection of profound books and letters written by the pen of divine determining, and countless buildings and palaces constructed with the hammer of divine power. Each of these singly in thousands of ways and together in uncountable ways utters the following testimony: these innumerable dominical and merciful deeds, and the endless manifestations of the 1,001 divine names which are the source of the deeds, and the infinite manifestations of the 7 transcendent attributes which are the source of the beautiful names, in endless and infinite ways point to and testify to the necessary existence and unity of an all-glorious essence which is the source of those all-embracing sacred 7 attributes and is qualified by them. And so too all the instances of beauty, loveliness, perfection, and exquisiteness found in those beings self-evidently testify altogether to the sacred beauties and perfections of the dominical deeds, and the divine names and attributes and qualities which are fitting and worthy of them, and to the sacred beauty of the most pure and holy essence. So the truth of dominicality that manifests itself within the truth of activity reveals and makes itself known in qualities and acts such as creating, originating, fashioning, and bringing into being with knowledge and wisdom, determining, forming, administering, and changing with regularity and balance, transforming, causing to descend, and perfecting with purpose and will, and feeding, nurturing, and bestowing generosity and bounty with tenderness and mercy. And within the truth of the manifestation of dominicality, the truth of the immediately perceived revelation of divinity makes itself known and recognized through the compassionate and munificent manifestations of the beautiful names, and through the glorious and beauteous manifestations of the 7 affirmative attributes: life, knowledge, power, will, hearing, sight, and speech. Just as the attribute of speech makes the most sacred essence known through revelation and inspiration, so too the attribute of power makes the essence known through its skilled works and effects, each of which is like a word assuming external shape, presenting the cosmos from end to end under the aspect of an incarnate book of discernment. It describes and makes known a powerful possessor of glory. As for the attribute of knowledge, it makes known a single most sacred essence through each of the wise, well-ordered, and balanced objects of creation, through each creature administered, directed, adorned, and made distinct by God's knowledge. As for the attribute of life, it is proven not only by its own evidences, but also by all the works that proclaim God's power, by all the well-ordered, wise, balanced, and adorned forms and states that indicate God's knowledge, as well as by all proofs of all other attributes. Thus life, showing as witnesses all animate beings, which act as mirrors reflecting those abundant proofs, makes known an eternally living and self-subsistent essence. It is also this attribute that constantly changes the cosmos in order to produce in it ever fresh and various manifestations and designs, and turns it into a supreme mirror composed of countless smaller mirrors. Similarly, the attributes of seeing and hearing, willing and speaking, each reveal and make known the most sacred essence, just as the cosmos does. Then too, just as the attributes point to the existence of the possessor of glory, they also indicate in most manifest fashion the existence and reality of life, and the livingness and permanence of that essence. For knowing is a sign of life, hearing is an indication of life, seeing belongs only to the living, will takes place only with life, purposive power is found only in living beings, and speech is a task for those endowed with knowledge and life. It follows from the foregoing that the attribute of life has proofs 7 times as numerous as the cosmos, and evidences that proclaim its existence and the existence of the one whom it qualifies. Thus it comes to be the foundation and source of the attributes, the origin and support of the supreme name. Since the Risale-i Nur establishes this first truth with powerful proofs and clarifies it, we will content ourselves now with a drop from this ocean. The second truth: divine discourse, which proceeds from the attribute of speech. Were the sea to become ink for the words of my sustainer. Nur Shanash Quran 18109. According to the inner sense of this verse, divine discourse is infinite. The clearest sign demonstrating the existence of a being is his speech. This truth, therefore, constitutes an infinite testimony to the existence and unity of the pre-eternal speaker, since 2 powerful evidences of this truth are revelation and inspiration, set forth in the 14th and 15th degrees of this treatise. Another broad proof is provided by sacred and heavenly books, as indicated in the 10th degree, and a further most brilliant and comprehensive proof is furnished by the Quran of of miraculous exposition, as discussed in the 17th degree. For all these reasons, we refer our readers to those degrees for the exposition and affirmation of this truth. Enough for us and for our traveler, who was unable to proceed beyond this point, are the lights and mysteries contained in the sublime verse that proclaims this truth in miraculous fashion and adds its own testimony to all of the preceding ones. God bears witness that there is no God but He, as do the angels and the possessors of knowledge, steadfast in equity. There is no God but He, the mighty, the wise. Quran 3:18. In allusion to the core of the lesson learned by our traveler at this sacred station, we said in the 19th degree of the first station, there is no God but God, the necessary existent, the one, the unique. His are the beautiful names, His are the supreme attributes, and His is the most sublime similitude. To His necessary existence in unity points the necessarily existent essence, with the consensus of all its sacred and comprehensive attributes and all of its beautiful names, manifested according to the consensus of His dominant qualities and deeds. By the testimony of the sublimity, of the truth of the self-revelation of divinity in the manifestation of dominicality, in the permanence of imperious activity through the act of bringing into being, creating, making, and originating in will and in power, and through the act of determining, forming, and regulating in choice and in wisdom, through the act of expending, preserving, ordering, administering, and nurturing in purposiveness and mercy in complete order and equilibrium, as too by the testimony of the sublimity, of the comprehensiveness, of the truth of the mysteries of the verse, God bears witness that there is no God but He, as do the angels and the possessors of knowledge, steadfast in equity. There is no God but He, the mighty, the wise. Note: each of the truths that offer their testimony in the 19 degrees of the first chapter of the second station above not only indicate necessary existence through existence and presence, but also through their comprehensiveness attest God's unity and oneness. But since they prove existence most clearly and explicitly, we regarded them first as proofs of necessary existence. As for the second chapter of the second station, the truths in question will be designated instead as proofs of divine unity, insofar as they explicitly prove unity and implicitly necessity. In reality, each proves the other. Unity proves necessity, and necessity proves unity. In order to indicate the difference, we said repeatedly in the first chapter, by the testimony of the sublimity of the comprehensiveness of the truth of, while in the second chapter we shall recurrently say, by the witnessing of the sublimity of the comprehensiveness of the truth of, thus indicating the evident visibility of divine unity. I had the intention of explaining the degrees of the second chapter, just as I did in the first chapter, but on account of various obstacles I am compelled to be summary and concise. I leave it to other parts of the Risale-i Nur to expound these matters as they deserve to be expounded. Second chapter, concerning proofs of the divine unity. The traveler who had been sent to the world in order to attain faith, who journeyed through the whole cosmos in his mind in order to ask all things concerning his Creator, to seek his sustainer in every place and find his God with the utmost certainty at the point of necessary existence, this traveler said to his intellect, "Come, let us depart on a new journey in order to behold the proofs of the unity of our necessarily existent Creator." They set out together. At the first stopping place they saw 4 sacred truths prevailing over the whole cosmos, truths that self-evidently necessitated the unity of God. The first truth, absolute divinity. The absorption of each class of men in a mode of worship dictated by their innate dispositions, the species of worship engaged in by other animate beings as well as inanimate beings through the performance of their essential functions, the way in which all material and immaterial bounties and gifts in the cosmos become means inciting men to worship and thanks, to praise and gratitude, the fashion in which all the manifestations of the unseen and epiphanies of the Spirit, revelation and inspiration unanimously proclaim the exclusive fitness of one God to receive worship. All of this, in most evidential fashion, proves the reality and dominance of a single and absolute divinity. If the truth of such a divinity exists, it can in no way accept partnership. For those who respond to divinity, that is, the fitness to be worshipped, with thanks and worship, are the conscious and animate fruits on the highest branches of the tree of the cosmos. If others were able to gratify and place under their obligation those conscious beings in such fashion as to make them turn away from and forget their true object of worship, who may indeed be swiftly forgotten because of his invisibility, this would be in such utter contradiction to the essence of divinity and its sacred purposes that it could in no way be allowed. It is for this reason that the Quran so repeatedly and with such vehemence refutes polytheism and threatens the polytheists with hellfire. The second truth, absolute dominicality. The ubiquitous workings of a wise and compassionate hidden hand throughout the cosmos, especially in animate beings and their nurturing and development everywhere in the same fashion and yet in a totally unexpected form, must be without doubt the emanation and light of an absolute dominicality and a decisive proof of its reality. An absolute dominicality cannot accept any partnership, for since the important aims and purposes of dominicality, such as the manifestation of its beauty, the proclamation of its perfection, the revelation of its precious arts, and the display of its hidden accomplishments, are combined and concentrated in particulars and animate beings, the slightest attribution to God of a partner, when entering even the most particular of things and the smallest of animate beings, will frustrate the attainment of those purposes and destroy those aims, averting the faces of conscious beings from those purposes, and the one who conceived them toward causes will be totally opposed and hostile to the essence of dominicality, and absolute dominicality cannot in any way countenance it. The abundant proclamations in the Quran of God's sanctity and transcendence, its verses and words, even its letters and their shapes, are constant guides to God's unity, made necessary by the mystery we have just expounded. The third truth, perfections, the self-evident testimony to the existence of the truth of perfections given by all the exalted instances of wisdom in the universe, all its wondrous beauties, its just laws, its wise purposes, and in particular its testimony to the perfections of the Creator who brought forth the cosmos out of the void and then administered it in every way miraculously and beauteously, as well as the perfections of man, who is the conscious mirror of the Creator. Such testimony is extremely clear. There exists then the truth of perfections, and the certainty that the Creator, who fashioned the cosmos in perfection, must himself possess perfection. Further, the perfections of man, the most important fruit of the universe, God's vicegerent on earth, the beloved and most valued object of his creation, these are also established as true. Therefore, to assign partners to God would be unacceptable and false, for it would condemn to destruction and perdition all of the perfect and wise beings we behold with our eyes. It would turn the cosmos into a vain plaything of accident, a place of amusement for nature, a cruel slaughterhouse for the animate, an awesome house of sorrows for the conscious. It would reduce man, whose perfections are visible in his works, to the level of the most wretched, distraught, and vile animal, and it would draw a veil across the infinite perfections of the Creator that are reflected in the mirror of all beings, thus nullifying the result of his activity and denying his creativity. Since assigning partners to God contradicts divine, human, and cosmic perfections, and its denial of them has been established and explained in the first station of the second ray devoted to three fruits of divine unity, with strong and decisive proofs, we refer our readers that work and cut short the discussion here. The fourth truth, sovereignty. Whoever looks at the cosmos with comprehensive attention will see it to resemble a most prosperous and active kingdom, a city administered most wisely and ruled most firmly. He sees all things and all species obediently engaged in a particular function. According to the military metaphor contained in the verse, gods are the armies of the heavens and earth. Punt, Quran 48:4. The prevailing creative commands, imperious orders, and kingly laws enunciated in those numerous armies that extend from the hosts of the atom, the battalions of the vegetable kingdom, the brigades of the animal kingdom, to the armies of the stars, and embrace both the lowliest soldier and the loftiest commander. They all indicate self-evidently the existence of an absolute sovereignty and a universal authority. There is then a truth of absolute sovereignty, and there can be no truth of assigning partners to God. For according to the decisive truth of the verse, were there to be in the heavens and earth gods other than God, verily they would be corrupted. Quran 21:22. If numerous hands all engage assertively in the same task, the result will be confusion. If there are two kings in one country, or even two headmen in one district, order will disappear and administration be replaced by anarchy. But on the contrary, we see everywhere such order, from the wing of the fly to the lamps of the heavens, from the cells of the body to the signs of the planets, that there is no possibility for the intervention of any partner in God's affairs. Sovereignty is, moreover, a station of dignity. To accept a rival would flout the dignity of sovereignty. The fact that man, who needs the assistance of many people on account of his impotence, will kill his brothers and offspring in the cruelest fashion for the sake of some petty, apparent, and temporary sovereignty, shows that sovereignty rejects all notion of partnership. If so feeble a one acts thus for the sake of so petty a sovereignty, it follows that the possessor of absolute power, the master of all creation, will never permit one other than himself to participate in his sacred sovereignty, the means to his real and universal dominicality and divinity. Since this truth has been established with firm proofs in numerous places throughout the Risale-i Nur, and especially the second second station of the second ray, we refer the reader to those pages for further discussion of it. Through witnessing these four truths, our traveler came to know divine unity with the degree of certain and clear witnessing. His faith shone, and with all his power he said, "There is no God but God. He is one, he has no partner." In brief allusion to the lesson he derived from this station, we said in the second chapter of the first station, "There is no God but God, the one, the unique, to whose unity and the necessity of whose existence point the witnessing of the sublimity of the truth of the manifestation of absolute divinity, as well as the witnessing of the sublimity of the comprehensiveness of the truth of the manifestation of absolute dominicality that requires unity, the witnessing of the sublimity of the comprehensiveness of the truth of the perfections that arise from unity, and the witnessing of the sublimity of the comprehensiveness of the truth of absolute sovereignty that prevents and contradicts the existence of any partnership." Then that restless traveler addressed his heart and said, "The fact that the people of faith, and particularly those affiliated with a Sufi order, are constantly repeating the words, 'No God but He,' and recalling and proclaiming God's unity, is an indication that the affirmation of God's unity comprises many degrees. Such affirmation is moreover a most enjoyable, most valuable, and most exalted sacred duty, instinctive function, and act of worship. Let us then, in order to attain a further degree, open the door of another stopping place in this abode of instruction. For the true affirmation of God's unity we seek is not some imaginary species of knowledge. It is rather an affirmation that in terms of logic is deemed the opposite of imagination, that is far more valuable than cognition based on imagination, that is the result of proof, that is designated a knowledge. The true affirmation of God's unity is a judgment, a confirmation, an assent, and acceptance that can find its sustainer present with all things, that sees in all things a path leading to its creator, and does not regard anything as an obstacle to his presence. For otherwise it would always be necessary to tear and cast aside the veil of the cosmos in order to find its sustainer. "Onward then," said the traveler to himself, as he knocked at the door of God's sublimity and grandeur. He entered the stopping place of God's deeds and workings, the world of creation and origination, and there he saw that five comprehensive truths were prevailing over the entire cosmos and offering self-evident proof of the divine unity. The first truth, that of grandeur and sublimity. Since this truth is explained with different proofs in the second station of the second ray and various other places in the Risale-i Nur, we restrict ourselves here to the following. The being that creates and then administers at a single time and in a single fashion the stars that are thousands of years distant from each other, that creates at a single time and in a single form the countless members of the same species of flower, distributed over the east and the west, the north and south of the globe, that administers, nurtures, quickens, distinguishes, and adorns more than 200,000 different types of plant and species of animal in 5 or 6 weeks, with the utmost regularity and equilibrium, without any confusion, defect, or error, in order to provide every spring on the face of the earth more than 100,000 specimens of the supreme resurrection, and thus prove before man's eyes a remarkable event now belonging to the past and the realm of the unseen, namely the creation of the heavens and the earth in 6 days, as indicated in the verse, He it is who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, is Quran 57:4, the being that causes the earth to revolve, as evidenced in the verse, He merges night with day and day with night, in Quran 3:27, and turns the night into the page on which the events of the day are written. This same being knows and administers according to His own will, all at the same time, the most secret and obscure thoughts that occur to men's hearts. Since each of the aforementioned acts is in reality one act, it follows that their glorious doer is a unique and powerful being enjoying such grandeur and sublimity that nowhere, in nothing, in no way does it leave the slightest possibility for the acceptance of partnership. On the contrary, it uproots all such possibility. Since such sublime power and grandeur exist, and since that grandeur is at the very apex of perfection and comprehends everything, it is certainly in no way possible to permit or allow any attribution of partners to that unique and powerful being, for so doing would ascribe impotence or need to that power, fault to that grandeur, defect to that perfection, and impose restriction on that comprehensiveness. No sound intellect could deem this possible. The assignment of partners to God is then, by virtue of the offense it causes to God's grandeur, the dignity of His glory and His sublimity, so grave a crime that the Quran of miraculous exposition decrees with an earnest threat. God does not pardon the assignment to him of a partner. He pardons whatever is lesser than that. Quran 4:48. The second truth, the absoluteness, the comprehensiveness and appearance in infinite form of the dominical deeds seen at work in the cosmos. It is only God's wisdom and will that limits and restricts those deeds, as well as the inherent capacities of the objects and places in which they manifest themselves. Stray chance, dumb nature, blind force, unconscious causality, and the elements that without restriction are scattered in every direction. None of these can have any part in the most balanced, wise, perspicacious, life-giving, orderly, and firm deeds of the Creator. They are used rather by the command, will, and power of the glorious doer as an apparent veil to conceal his power. 3 out of innumerable examples. We will set forth 3 from among the numerous subtle points that relate to the 3 deeds indicated in 3 continuous verses in Surah Al-Nahl. The first, your sustainer inspired in the bee that it should seek a dwelling place in the mountains. Yasur Quran 1668. The bee is, with respect to its disposition and function, such a miracle of God's power that a whole Surah Al-Nahl has been named after it. For to inscribe in the minute head of that little honey machine a complete program for the fulfillment of its important task, to place in its diminutive stomach the most delicious of foods and to ripen it there, to place in its sting poison capable of destroying and killing animate beings without causing any harm to its own body or the member in question, to do all this without the utmost care and knowledge, with exceeding wisdom and purposiveness, partakes of a perfect orderliness and equilibrium, and hence unconscious, disorderly, disequilibrated nature. An accident could never interfere or participate in any of this. The appearance and comprehensiveness of this divine craft, this dominical deed, which is miraculous in 3 separate respects, in the countless bees that are found scattered over the earth, with the same wisdom, the same care, the same symmetry, at the same time, and in the same fashion, this is a self-evident proof of God's unity. The second verse, there is for you a lesson in cattle. From what is within their bodies, between excretions and blood, we produce for your drink milk, pure and agreeable to those who drink it. Quran 1666. This verse is a decree overflowing with useful instruction to place in the nipples of cows, camels, goats, and sheep, as well as human mothers, in the midst of blood and excrement, but without being polluted by them, a substance the exact opposite, pure, clean, pleasant, nutritive, and white milk, and to inspire in their hearts tenderness toward their young that is still more pleasant, sweeter, and more valuable than milk. This requires such a degree of mercy, wisdom, knowledge, power, will, and care that it cannot in any way be the work of turbulent chance, of the tangled elements, or of blind forces. The manifestation, workings, and comprehensiveness of so miraculous a dominical art and so wise a divine deed all over the face of the globe and in the countless hearts and breasts of innumerable mothers of hundreds of thousands of species in the same instant, the same fashion, with the same wisdom and the same care, this too constitutes a self-evident proof of God's unity. The third verse. From the fruits of the date palm and the vine you take sugar and fine nourishment. Verily therein is a sign for a people possessing intelligence. Lot, Quran 1667. This verse invites our attention to the date and to grapes, saying, for those of intelligence, there is great proof, argument, and evidence of the divine unity in these 2 fruits. These 2 fruits yield nurture and sustenance, fresh and dry fruit, and give rise to most delicious forms of food. Yet the trees that bear them stand in waterless sand and dry soil, and are thus miracles of power and wonders of wisdom. They are each of them like a factory producing sweet sugar, a machine manufacturing honey like syrup, a work of art created with perfect order and sensitive balance, wisdom and care. Hence anyone with a grain of intelligence will say on contemplating them, the one who made them in this fashion may very well be the creator of the whole cosmos. For in front of our eyes, each vine branch the thickness of a finger will hold 20 bunches of grapes, and each bunch will in turn contain hundreds of sugary grapes, each like a little pump emitting syrup, to clothe the surface of each grape with a fine, delicate, thin, and colorful protection, to place in its delicate and soft heart seeds with their hard shells, which are like its retentive faculty, program, and the story of its life, to manufacture in its stomach a sweetmeat like the helva of paradise, a honey like the water of Kauthar, to create an infinite number of such grapes over the face of the entire earth, with the same care and wisdom and wonderful art, and at the same time and in the same fashion. This proves in self-evident fashion that the one who fulfills these tasks is the creator of the whole cosmos, and this deed, requiring as it does infinite power and limitless wisdom, can be only his deed. Yes, blind and stray, disorderly and unconscious, aimless, aggressive, and anarchic forces, nature and causality cannot have anything to do with this most sensitive balance, this most skillful art, this most wise scheme. They cannot even stretch out their hands toward it. It falls to them only to be employed through the dominical command as passive objects, as curtain holders, just like the 3 points proving divine unity contained in the 3 truths indicated in the 3 verses. The countless manifestations and workings of infinite dominical deeds attest unanimously the unity of a single one of unity He, the all-glorious one. The third truth, the creation of beings, particularly plants and animals, with absolute speed and absolute orderliness, with absolute ease and extreme skill, talent, ability and order, with great value and distinction, despite extreme abundance and intermingling. Yes, to produce with extreme swiftness and in extreme abundance, most skillfully and artistically, with great ease and facility combined with the utmost care and orderliness, with great value and distinction despite abundance and intermingling, without any form of confusion or deficiency, this can be achieved only by a unique being whose power is such that nothing appears difficult to it. For that power, it is as easy to create stars as atoms, the greatest as the smallest, a whole species as a single member of a species, a sublime and comprehensive universal as a restricted and petty particular. It is as easy for him to revivify and quicken the whole earth as to do the same with a tree, or to erect a tree as tall as a mountain as it is to produce a seed no bigger than a fingernail. All of these deeds he performs in front of our eyes. So the exposition, the solution, the uncovering and proof of the mystery of this degree of the assertion of the divine unity, this third truth, this word of unity, the mystery that the greatest universal is like the smallest particular without the slightest difference between them, this beneficial wisdom, this supreme talisman, this riddle beyond the reach of the intellect, this most significant foundation of Islam, this most profound source of faith, this greatest basis of the divine unity, the setting forth of all this opens the talisman of the Quran and makes it possible to know the most secret and unknowable riddle of the creation of all beings, a riddle that reduces philosophy to impotence. Thanks and praise 100,000 times the letters of the Risale-i Nur be to the compassionate Creator that the Risale-i Nur has solved, uncovered and established this wondrous talisman, this wondrous riddle. It has been proven with decisive arguments to the same degree of certainty that twice 2 is 4, particularly in the discussion of He is powerful over all things toward the end of the 20th letter. In the section concerning God's being an all-powerful agent in the 29th word, one devoted to the resurrection, and in the section proving the divine power in the degrees of God is most great in the 29th flash, written in Arabic. For that reason we assign to those parts of the Risale-i Nur the exposition of this matter, wishing however to set out briefly the foundations and proofs that solve this mystery, and to allude to 13 mysteries that resemble 13 steps, or a list of contents. I have indeed written the first and second mysteries, but unfortunately 2 powerful obstacles, material and immaterial, have caused me to abandon the remainder. The first mystery: if something be essential, its opposite cannot have access to the essence defined by that thing, for that would be equivalent to the union of opposites, which is an absurdity. Now with regard to this principle, since God's power is related to his essence and is an essential concomitant of his most sacred essence, impotence, the opposite of power, cannot in any way gain access to that all-powerful essence. Moreover, the existence of degrees within a thing comes about through the intervention in it of its opposite. For example, strong and weak degrees of light result from the intervention of darkness. High and low degrees of heat proceed from the admixture of coldness, and greater and lesser amounts of strength are determined by the intervention and opposition of resistance. It is therefore impossible that degrees should exist in that power of the divine essence. He creates all things as if they were but a single thing. And since degrees do not exist in the power of the divine essence, and it does not admit of weakness or deficiency, no obstacle can in any way obstruct it, nor can the creation of anything cause it difficulty. Since then, nothing is difficult for God's power, he creates the supreme resurrection with the same ease as spring, spring with the same facility as a tree, and a tree with as little trouble as a flower. Further, he creates a flower as artistically as a tree as miraculously as a spring as comprehensively and wondrously as a resurrection. All of this he accomplishes in front of our eyes. It has been proved in the Risale-i Nur with decisive and strong proofs that if there were no divine unity, the making of a flower would be as difficult as a tree, or even more difficult. The making of a tree would be as hard as spring, or even more difficult, and creation would even lose its value and artistic quality. An animate being that now takes a minute to produce would be produced with difficulty in 1 year, or maybe never at all. It is then on account of this mystery that these fruits, flowers, trees, and animals that are extremely valuable, despite their ubiquitousness and abundance, and extremely artistic, despite the swiftness and ease of their fashioning, emerge in regular fashion onto the plane of being and assume their functions. Proclaiming God's glory, they accomplish their duties and depart, leaving behind their seed in their stead. Second mystery: through the mystery of luminosity, transparency, and obedience, just as through the manifestation of its essential power, a single sun reflects its light in a single mirror, so too, through the divine command and due to the extensive activity of that unrestricted power, it can easily bestow the same reflection, together with its light and heat on innumerable mirrors, shining objects and droplets. Great and small are the same. There is no difference between them. Similarly, like a single word can enter the ear of one man without trouble, so too, due to the infinite breadth of boundless creativity, it may enter a million ears with dominical permission, and a single light like an eye, or a single luminous spirit being like Gabriel, through the infinite breadth of dominical activity within the manifestation of mercy, may be present in, or look at, or enter thousands of places through divine power, as easily as they look at, or enter a single place. There is no difference between many and few. The pre-eternal power of God's essence is the most subtle and choicest of lights, the light of all lights. The quiddities, essences, and inner dimensions of all things are luminous and lustrous as mirrors. All things, from the atom, the plant, and the animate creature to the stars, the suns, and the moons, are extremely obedient and submissive to the command of that power of the divine essence, and subordinate to the orders of that pre-eternal power. It is for all of these reasons entirely natural that innumerable things should be created with the same ease as a single thing, and placed side by side with each other. No concern or task interferes with another. Great and small, many and few, particular and universal, all are the same for that power, for which nothing is difficult. As was said in the 10th and 29th words, through the mysteries of order, equilibrium, obedience to command, and submission to order, that power causes a great ship as big as 100 houses to move and advance as a child's finger pushes his toy. As a commander will send a single infantryman into battle with an order from his throne, so too he may throw a whole obedient army into the fray with the same single order. Let us suppose that two mountains are in a state of equilibrium in a large and sensitive balance. In the same way that a single walnut would cause one pan to rise and the other to fall if placed on one side of a balance containing two eggs, it would produce the same result with the scale containing the mountains. Through a wise law, it would cause one pan with its mountain to rise to the mountain top, and the other to descend with its mountain to the bottom of the valley. Since there is to be found in God's absolute, infinite, luminous, essential, and eternal power a divine justice and unending wisdom, that is the origin, source, fundament, and beginning of all order, regularity, and equilibrium in creation, and since all things, particular and universal, small and great, are obedient to the command of that power and submissive to its workings, it follows that God causes the stars to revolve and to move, through the wisdom of his order, as easily as he rotates and moves the atoms. In spring, just as he brings to life a single fly with a single order, so too he bestows life with the same ease and the same command on the whole species of fly, as well as all the hosts of plants and animals, through the mystery of the wisdom and equilibrium inherent in his power, and then sends them forth onto the plane of life. In the same way that he swiftly gives life to a tree in spring and infuses vitality in its bones with his wise and just absolute power, he also resurrects in the spring the corpse of the vast earth and brings into being hundreds of thousands of different specimens of resurrection similar to the tree. All this with the greatest of ease. With his creative command, he brings the earth back to life by the decree of, "There will be but a single cry, then they shall all be brought nigh unto us." Quran 36:53. That is, all men and jinn, with a single cry and command, shall be brought to us and made present at the plane of resurrection. Again, by his command, the hour shall be but a blinking of the eye, or even closer. Chase. Quran 16:77. That is, the bringing about of resurrection and the gathering that follows upon it shall take no longer than the opening and closing of an eye, or even less. Then there is the verse, "Your creation and resurrection is as a single soul, shirkam bamdana." Quran 31:28, meaning the following: O men, to create you and to bring you to life, to resurrect and gather you, is as easy for me as bringing one soul to life. It presents no problem to my power. According to the inner sense of these three verses, God will bring all men and jinn, all animals, spirit beings and angels to the field of the supreme gathering and the great balance with a single command and with great ease. One concern does not interfere with another. The remaining mysteries, from the 3rd and 4th as far as the 13th, have been postponed to another time in a fashion disagreeable to me. The fourth truth. The existence and appearance of all beings proclaim the divine unity in a self-evident fashion through their numerous points of unity and convergence, such as being simultaneously together and yet separate and unique, resembling one another, being the miniature or magnified versions of each other, being some universals and species and some particulars and individuals, resembling each other in the stamp of innate disposition, having affinity in the impress of artistry, and aiding and complementing each other with respect to their innate functions. They establish the unity of their maker, and with respect to dominicality, make it clear that the cosmos is a universal and a whole that may not be divided or fragmented. For example, in each spring, to create, order, and sustain the innumerable members of the 400,000 different species of plants and animals together and intermingled in a single moment and in the same fashion, without any error or mistake, with the utmost wisdom and perfection of artistry, to create all the different species of bird, from flies, which are like birds in miniature, to eagles, which are the supreme specimens of the species, then to equip them with the means of flight and subsistence, and to cause them to journey through the realm of the air, to imprint on the countenances of each of the birds in miraculous fashion a stamp of artistry, on the body of each of them a seal of wisdom, and in the quiddity of each of them in sustaining fashion a sign of God's unity, to cause wisely and mercifully particles of food to hasten to the aid of the cells of the body, plants to rush to the assistance of animals, and all mothers to go swiftly to the help of their powerless infants. To work on all things, particular and universal, from the Milky Way, the solar system, and the elements of the earth, down to the veils of the pupil of the eye, the petals of the rose, the husk of the corn, the seeds of the melon, like a series of intersecting circles with the same regularity, perfection of artistry, the same deed and plenitude of wisdom. To do all this establishes the following with self-evident certainty. He who performs these deeds is one and unique. His imprint is on all things. In the same way that he is not in any place, he is present in every place. Like the sun, all things are distant from him, but he is close to all things. Just as the greatest objects, such as the Milky Way and the solar system, are not difficult for him, so too the cells in man's blood, and the thoughts that pass across his heart are not secret from him, nor beyond the reach of his power. However great and multitudinous a thing may be, it is as easy for him as the smallest and scarcest thing. For he creates with ease a fly on the model of an eagle, a seed in the form of a tree in the shape of a garden with the artistry of a spring, and a spring on the scale of a resurrection. Things most valuable in their artistry he gives to us and bestows upon us most cheaply. The price that he asks of us is merely to say, "In the name of God, and praise be to God." In other words, the accepted price for all those numerous precious bounties is to say at the beginning of all things, "In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate," and at their end, "Praise be to God." Since this fourth truth is explained and proved elsewhere in the Risale-i Nur, we content ourselves here with this brief allusion. The fifth truth, perceived by our traveler at the second stage, the existence in the entirety of the cosmos, its pillars and parts, and all the beings contained in it, of the most perfect order and regularity, the sameness of the substances and purposive beings that are the means of the rotation and administration of that vast kingdom and are connected to its general scheme, the fact that the divine names and deeds that are at work in that magnificent city, that vast exhibition, encompass and comprehend all things or most things, despite their being one within the other, and of the same nature, and there being the same name and deed in every place, the fact that the elements and species that are the means for the administration, inhabiting, and construction of that well-adorned palace cover the whole face of the earth in their diffusion, despite their being one within the other, of the same nature, and the same element and the same species being found everywhere, all of this demands, proves, and affirms necessarily and self-evidently the following. The maker and disposer of this cosmos, the monarch and nurturer of this realm, the master and builder of this palace, is one, unique soul. He has neither like nor peer, neither minister nor aid. He has neither partner nor opposite. He has neither inability nor deficiency. Yes, order is in itself a perfect expression of unity. It demands a single orderer. It leaves no place for the assignment of partners to God, the source of dispute and dissension. There is a wise and precise order inherent in all things, whether universal or particular, from the total scheme of the cosmos and the daily and annual rotation of the earth down to the physiognomy of man, the complex of senses in man's head, and the circulation of white and red cells in man's blood. Nothing other than one absolutely powerful and absolutely wise can stretch out its hand intentionally and creatively toward anything, nor interfere with it. On the contrary, all things are recipients, means of manifestation, and passive. Now ordering, the pursuit of certain purposes, and the bestowal of regularity with a view to certain benefits can be done only by means of knowledge and wisdom, and performed only with will and choice. Certainly, and in all events, this wisdom-nurturing regularity, this infinitely varied ordering of the cosmos that before our very eyes assures various benefits, proves and affirms to a self-evident degree that the creator and disposer of all beings is one, an agent possessing will and choice. Everything comes into being through his power, assumes a particular state through his will, and takes on a particular form through his choice. The heat-giving lamp of this hospice, that is the world, is one. Its candle, that is the basis for the reckoning of time, is one. Its merciful sponge is one. Its fiery cook is one. Its life-giving beverage is one. Its well-guarded field is one, as well as 1,001 other instances of oneness. It follows from all of these instances of oneness that the maker and master of this hospice is also one, that he is extremely generous and hospitable, for he employs numerous high-ranking and great officials to serve the animate guests of his hospice. Names such as all-wise, compassionate, giver of forms, disposer, quickener, and nurturer, the impresses and manifestations of which are to be seen at work in every corner of the world, attributes such as wisdom, mercy, and grace, and acts such as formation, disposition, and nurturing are all one. They embrace every place in the utmost degree, each name and act being present there. They also complement the imprint of each other in such a way that it is as if those names and deeds were uniting in such fashion that power becomes identical with wisdom and mercy, and wisdom becomes identical with grace and life. For example, as soon as the activity of the name of Quickener appears in a thing, the activity of numerous other names such as Creator, Giver of Form, and Provider also appears at the same instant, everywhere, and in the same system. This of a certainty and self-evidently establishes and proves that that which is designated by the names and the doer of the comprehensive deeds that appear everywhere in the same fashion must also be one, single, and unique. In this we believe, and to this we give our assent. The elements that are the substance and material of creation encompass the whole earth. Each of the species of creation that bears an imprint attesting unity is diffused throughout the earth in unity, and so to speak conquers it. This also proves to the degree of being self-evident that those elements, together with what they embrace, and those species, together with their separate members, are the product and property of a single being. They are the products and servants of so unique and powerful a one that he employs those vast and imperious elements as obedient servants, and those species diffused throughout the earth as well disciplined soldiers. Since this truth also has been established and explained in other places in the Risale-i Nur, we content ourselves here with this brief indication. In summary of the witnessings that he derived from these 5 truths, through the superabundance of faith and the joy of divine unity, and in expression of his feelings, our traveler said to his heart, "Look upon the colored page of the cosmic book. See what forms the golden pen of power has traced. No dark point remains for the gaze of the heart's eye. It is as if God has inscribed his signs with light. Know too that the leaves in the world's book are dimensions infinite. The lines of time's events are works innumerable, written on the workbench of the preserved tablet of reality. A meaningful embodied word is every being in this world. Listen also to this. When all things proclaim, no God but God, they will in unison say, O truth and reality, and beseech in harmony, O living one. Yes, in all things there is a sign pointing to the fact that he is one. Hearkening to this, his heart and soul affirmed the truth of what they heard and said, yes, indeed. In brief allusion to the 5 truths of unity observed by our traveler through the world, our voyager through the cosmos, at this second stopping place, it was said in the 2nd chapter of the 1st station, there is no God but God, the one, the unique, to whose unity and necessary existence points the witnessing of the truth of grandeur and sublimity, its perfection and comprehensiveness. The witnessing of the truth of the appearance of deeds in absolute fashion, in infinitude, without any limitation except that of God's will and wisdom. The witnessing of the truth of the creation of beings in absolute multiplicity, with absolute swiftness, the creation of creatures in absolute ease, with absolute perfection, the origination of things made in absolute plenitude, with utter perfection of artistry and value. The witnessing of the truth of the existence of beings in universal and comprehensive fashion, joined, interconnected, and interrelated. The witnessing of the truth of universal order, an order incompatible with the assignation of partners to God. The witnessing of the unity of the sources of cosmic order, a unity that clearly attests the unity of their maker, the unity of the names and deeds that comprehend and permeate the universe, and the unity of the elements and species dispersed over the face of the earth in imperious fashion. That world traveler voyaging through different ages chanced upon the school of the renewer of the 2nd millennium, Imam-i Rabbani Ahmad Faruqi. He entered and listened to the lesson being taught by the Imam. The most important result yielded by all the Sufi paths is the unfolding of the truths of belief. The unfolding in clarity of a single truth of belief is preferable to 1,000 miraculous deeds and mystical visions. The Imam said too, in former times, great persons said that someone will arise from among the theologians and the scholars of the science of theology. He will prove all the truths of belief and Islam with rational proofs and the utmost clarity. I wish to be that man, and maybe I am. Ya Allah Shirlista. Time has proven that the man referred to here is not in fact an individual, but the Risale-i Nur itself. It may be that the people of unveiling happened to notice the insignificant interpreter and proclaimer of the Risale-i Nur, and hence came to speak of a man. He continued his instruction by saying that belief and the assertion of divine unity were the foundation, substance, light, and life of all human perfection. That the hadith, an hour's reflective thought, is better than a year's worship. Al-Ajluni Kashf al-Khafa, I 310, refers to reflection on belief, and that the silent mode of invocation practiced in the Naqshbandi order is a form of this most excellent reflection. The traveler listened with utmost care. He turned and addressed himself as follows: "It is thus that this heroic Imam speaks. To increase the strength of one's belief by as much as an atom is worth more than a ton of gnosis or other form of perfection, and sweeter than the honey of 100 visionary experiences." On the other hand, the philosophers of Europe have leagued together for 1,000 years to invent objections and doubts in their hostility to faith and the Quran, and to attack the believers. They wish to shake the pillars of belief that are the key, the source, the foundation of everlasting felicity, of life immortal, of eternal paradise. We ought therefore to strengthen our belief by making it one of realization instead of one of imitation. So come, let us advance. In order to bring the 29 degrees of faith that we have found, each as powerful as a mountain, to the blessed number of 33, the number of litanies that follow upon prayer, and in order to see a third stopping place in this realm of instruction, let us knock at the door of the dominical sustenance of the animate world, and open it with the key of "In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate." Speaking thus, he beseechingly knocked at the gate of this third stopping place, a compendium of wonders and a spectacle of marvels, saying, "In the name of God, the opener," he opened the gate. The third stopping place became visible to him. He entered and saw that it was illumined by 4 great and encompassing truths that demonstrated the divine unity as brightly as the sun. The first truth, the truth of opening. That is, the opening up from a single simple substance of innumerable varied and separate forms, together everywhere in a single instant and by a single deed, through the manifestation of the name of opener. Yes, in the same way that God's creative power has opened up innumerable beings like flowers in the garden of the cosmos, and endowed each with an orderly form and distinct identity through the manifestation of the name of opener, so too, although in more miraculous fashion, he has given to the 400,000 species of animate beings in the garden of the earth each its symmetrical, adorned, and distinct form. He creates you in the wombs of your mothers, creation after creation in 3 darknesses. That is God, your sustainer. His is the sovereignty. There is no God other than He. Where then will you turn? Quran 39-6. Naught is hidden from God, neither on earth nor in the heavens. He it is who forms you in the wombs as He wills. There is no God but He, the mighty, the wise. Quran 3:5-6. As these 2 verses indicate, the strongest proof of divine unity and the most remarkable miracle of divine power is God's opening up of forms, because the opening of forms is repeatedly established and expounded in different ways elsewhere in the Risale-i Nur, and particularly in the 6th and 7th degrees of the 1st chapter of the 2nd station of this treatise. We refer the discussion of this matter to those places and restrict ourselves here to the following. According to the testimony of botany and biology, based on profound research, there is in the opening and unfolding of forms such comprehensiveness and artistry that other than a single and unique one absolutely powerful, able to see and do all things in all things, no one could undertake this comprehensive and all-embracing deed. For this deed of the unfolding of forms demands a wisdom, an attention, and a comprehensiveness that are present at all times and are contained within an infinite power. This power in turn can be found only in that unique being who administers the whole cosmos. As is decreed in the above quoted verses, God's attribute of opening, expressed in the opening and creation of the forms of men from their mothers' wombs, within 3 darknesses, separately, with equilibrium, distinctness, and order, without any error, confusion, or mistake. This truth of the unfolding of the forms of all men and animals, all over the earth, with the same power, the same wisdom, and the same artistry, is a most powerful proof of God's unity. For to comprehend and embrace all things is itself a form of unity that leaves no room for the assignation of partners to God. Just as the 19 truths of the 1st chapter bearing witness to the necessary existence of God also attest the existence of the Creator through their own existence, so too they bear witness to His unity through their comprehensiveness. Our traveler then saw the following 2nd truth in the 3rd stopping place, the 2nd truth, the truth of mercifulness. We see with our own eyes that there is one who has covered the face of the earth with thousands of gifts of mercy and made it into a feasting place. He has laid out a spread of hundreds of thousands of the different delicious foods of mercifulness, and made the inside of the earth a storehouse containing thousands of precious bounties of compassionateness and wisdom, that being sends to us also the earth, in its yearly rotation, like a ship or a train, laden with the finest of the hundreds of thousands of vital human necessities, proceeding from the world of the unseen. And he sends to us too the spring, like a wagon carrying food and clothing for us. Thus does he nurture us with utmost compassion. In order for us to profit from those gifts and bounties, he has moreover given us hundreds and thousands of appetites, needs, feelings, sensations, and senses. As was set forth in the fourth ray concerning the verse on the sufficiency of God, he has given us a stomach that can take pleasure in infinite varieties of food. He has given us such a life that through the senses associated with it, we can derive benefit from the innumerable bounties of the vast corporeal world, just as if it were some bounteous spread. He has favored us with the human state, so that we delight in the boundless gifts of both the spiritual and material worlds, through instruments such as the intellect and the heart. He has conveyed Islam to us, so that we derive light from the boundless treasuries of the unseen and manifest realms. He has guided us to faith, so that we are illumined by the innumerable lights and gifts of this world and the hereafter. This cosmos is like a palace fitted out and adorned by the divine quality of mercy, with innumerable antiques and valuable items, which then gives to man's hands the keys to open all the chests and chambers in that palace, as well as bestowing on man's nature all the needs and senses that will enable him to make use of them. This mercy that embraces this world and the hereafter, and indeed all things, is without doubt a manifestation of oneness within unity. Just as the light of the sun is a parable of unity, through its comprehending all things that face it, every bright and transparent object that receives the reflection of the light, heat, and seven colors of the sun is also a parable and a symbol of oneness. Hence, whoever sees its all-embracing light will conclude that the sun of this earth is one and unique, witnessing the warm and luminous reflection of the sun in all bright objects, and even in drops of water. He will say that the oneness of the sun, or the sun itself, is present with its attributes close to all things. It is at the mirror-like heart of all things. So too, the encompassing of all things by the extensive mercy of the merciful one of beauty, like a light, demonstrates the unity of that merciful one, and that he in no way has any partner. Similarly, the fact that under the veil of that all-embracing mercy, the lights of most of the merciful one's names and a sort of manifestation of his essence are found in everything, and especially in all living beings, and in man in particular, and the fact that this gives each individual a comprehensiveness arising from life which causes him to look to and be related to the whole universe, proves the oneness of the merciful one, and that he is present with all things and does all things in all things. Yes, the merciful one shows the splendor of his glory in the whole of the cosmos and all over the earth through the unity and comprehensiveness of his mercy. With the manifestation of his oneness, he gathers together in every member of all animate species, and particularly man, specimens of all his bounties, orders the tools and instruments of animate beings, and proclaims the special solicitude of his beauty to each individual, this without shattering the wholeness of the universe. As for man, it is in him that God makes known, in concentrated form, the various forms of his bounty. Similarly, a melon can be said to be concentrated in its seed. The being that makes the seed must necessarily be he who makes the melon. Then, with the special balance of his knowledge and the particular law of his wisdom, he draws the seed out from it, gathers it together, and clothes it in a body. Nothing other than the one and unique master craftsman who makes the melon is able to make its seed. That would be impossible, since through the manifestation of mercifulness, the cosmos becomes like a tree or a garden, the earth becomes like a fruit or a melon, and man becomes like a seed. Of a certainty, the creator and sustainer of the smallest animate being must be the creator of all the earth and all the cosmos. In short, just as the making and unfolding of the regular and orderly forms of all beings through the truth of opening, which is comprehensive, proves unity to the point of being self-evident, so too the truth of mercifulness, which encompasses all things through its nurturing of all animate beings that come into existence and enter the life of this world, particularly the newly arrived, with the utmost order and regularity, causing all necessities to reach them, forgetting none of them. This same mercy, reaching all individuals everywhere at the same instant, demonstrates both unity and oneness within unity. Our traveler then witnessed the following third truth in the third stopping place. The third truth the truth of disposing and administering. That is, to administer with complete order and equilibrium both the awesome and swift-moving heavenly bodies and imperious interfering elements and the needy weak denizens of earth, to cause them to aid each other, to administer them jointly with each other, to take all necessary measures concerning them, and to make this vast world like a perfect kingdom, a magnificent city, a well-adorned palace, leaving aside the vast spheres of this imperious and merciful administration, since it is explained and proved in important sections of the Risale-i Nur, such as the 10th word. We will show by means of a comparison a single page and stage of that administration as it manifests itself in the spring on the face of the earth. Let us suppose, for example, that some wondrous world conqueror assembled an army from 400,000 different groups and nationalities and supplied the clothes and weapons, the instructions and dismissals and salaries of every group and nationality, separately and variously, without any defect or shortcoming, without error or mistake, at the proper time, without any delay or confusion, with the utmost regularity, and in most perfect form. No cause other than the extraordinary power of that wondrous commander could stretch out his hand to attempt that vast, complex, subtle, balanced, multitudinous, and just administration. Were it to stretch out its hand, it would destroy the equilibrium and cause confusion. So too we see with our own eyes that an unseen hand creates and administers every spring a magnificent army composed of 400,000 different species. In the autumn, an example of the day of resurrection, it dismisses 300,000 out of those 400,000 species of plants and animals from their duties, and they go on leave through the activity of death and in the name of decease. In spring, a sample of the gathering that follows resurrection, it constructs 300,000 examples of raising from the dead in the space of a few weeks, with the utmost order and discipline. In the case of the tree, 4 such resurrections take place with respect to the tree itself, its leaves, its flowers, and its fruits. After showing spring to our eyes exactly like the preceding one, it gives each species and group in that army of glory that contains 400,000 different species, its appropriate sustenance and provision, its defensive weapons and distinctive garments, its orders and dismissals, and all the tools and instruments it needs, with the utmost order and regularity, without error or slip, without confusion or omission, in unexpected fashion and at the proper time. It thus proves its unity, oneness, uniqueness, and infinite power and boundless mercy within perfection of dominicality, sovereignty, and wisdom, and writes with the pen of divine determining this proclamation of divine unity on the face of the earth, on the page of every spring. After reading only a single page of this proclamation of one spring, our traveler said to himself, "The torment of hellfire is pure justice for those who commit the error of denying resurrection, for such denial would be to refute the numerous promises and to deny the power of one powerful and compelling, a wrathful one of glory, who has promised and assured all of his prophets thousands of times and set forth in thousands of verses of the Quran, explicitly and by way of allusion, that he will bring about a resurrection and gathering far easier for him than the thousands of miraculous gatherings that occur every spring, each more wondrous than the supreme gathering." His soul responded, "We believe in what you say. The fourth truth, which forms the 33rd degree, the truth of compassionateness and bestowal of provision. That is the giving over the whole face of the globe, within the earth, in the air above it, and the ocean around it, to all animate beings, especially those endowed with spirit, and among them especially the impotent, the weak and the young, all of their necessary sustenance, material and immaterial, in the most solicitous manner, deriving it from dry and rude soil, from solid bone-like dry pieces of wood, and in the case of the most delicate of all forms of sustenance, from between blood and urine, at the proper time, in orderly fashion, without any omission or confusion, in front of our eyes, by an unseen hand. Yes, the verse, God is the provider, the firm possessor of strength. Quran 51:58 restricts to God the task of sustaining and providing, and the verse, there is no moving thing on earth but depends on God for its sustenance. He knows its resting place and storage place. All is in a book perspicuous, Quran 11.6. provides a dominical guarantee and pledge to furnish provision for all men and animals. Similarly, the verse, the beasts do not carry their sustenance. God sustains them and you, and he is all-hearing, all-knowing, Shis. Quran 29-60 establishes and proclaims that it is God who guarantees and provides for all impotent, powerless, weak and wretched creatures that are unable to secure their own sustenance in an unexpected fashion, indeed from the unseen or even out of nothing. It is He, for example, who provides for insects on the ocean bed and their young. This proclamation is directed in particular to those men who worship causes and are unaware that it is He who bestows provision from behind the veil of causality. Numerous other verses of the Quran and innumerable pieces of cosmic evidence unanimously demonstrate that it is the compassionateness of a single glorious provider that nurtures all animate beings. Now the trees require a certain form of sustenance, but have neither power nor will. They remain therefore in their places, trusting in God, and their provision comes hastening to them. So too the sustenance of infants flows to their mouths from wondrous small pumps, aided by the solicitude and tenderness of their mothers. Then, when the infants acquire a little power and will, the milk ceases. These various instances clearly prove that licit sustenance is not proportionate to will and power, but comes in relation to weakness and impotence, which induce trust in God. Will, power, and cleverness frequently incite greed, which is a source of loss, and often push certain learned men toward a form of beggary, whereas by contrast the trusting weakness of the boorish, crude, and common man may cause him to attain riches. The proverb, "How many a learned man has striven in vain, and how many an ignoramus gained rich provision," establishes that licit provision is not won by power and will, but by a mercy that finds working and striving acceptable. It is bestowed by a tenderness that takes pity on need. Now provision and sustenance is of two kinds. The first is true and natural provision that required for life. This is guaranteed by the sustainer. It is indeed so regular and well ordered that this natural provision, stored in the body in the form of fat and other things, is enough to ensure survival for at least 20 days, even if nothing is eaten. Those who apparently die of hunger before the 20 or 30 days are up and before the provision stored up in their body is exhausted die in reality not from a lack of provision, but from a disease arising from lack of caution and the disturbance of fixed habit. The second form of provision, metaphorical and artificial provision, arising due to addiction from habit, wastefulness, and misuse, but acquiring the appearance of necessity. This form is not guaranteed by the sustainer, but depends on his generosity. Sometimes he may give it, sometimes he may not give it. With respect to this second form of provision and sustenance, happy is he who regards his frugality, a source of happiness and pleasure, contentment and licit striving, as a form of worship and active prayer for sustenance. He accepts God's bounty gratefully and appreciatively and passes his life in happy fashion. Wretched is he who on account of prodigality, the source of wretchedness and loss, and greed, abandons licit striving, knocks at every door, passes his life in sloth, oppression and wretchedness, and indeed puts his own life to death. In the same way that a stomach requires sustenance, so too the subtle capacities and senses of man, his heart, spirit, intelligence, eye, ear, and mouth, also request their sustenance from the compassionate provider, and gratefully receive it. To each of them separately and in appropriate form is presented such provision from the treasury of mercy as will rejoice them and give them pleasure. Indeed, the compassionate provider, in order to give to them provision in more generous measure, has created each of man's subtle capacities, eye and ear, heart, imagination, and intellect, in the form of a key to his treasury of mercy. For example, the eye is a key to the treasury containing such precious jewels as the fairness and beauty to be seen on the face of the universe, and the same holds true of all the others mentioned. They all benefit through faith. To resume after our digression, the all-powerful and wise one, who created this cosmos, created also life as a comprehensive summary of the cosmos, and concentrated all of his purposes and the manifestations of his names therein. So too, within the realm of life, he made of provision a comprehensive center of activity, and created within animate beings the taste for provision, thus causing animate beings to respond to his dominicality and love with a permanent and universal gratitude, thankfulness, and worship that is one of the significant purposes and instances of wisdom inherent in the creation of the universe. For example, it is one of the activities of dominicality to cause every area of the broad realm of dominicality to rejoice. The heavens are caused to rejoice with the angels and spirit beings, the world of the unseen with spirits, and the material world, particularly the air and the earth, with the existence of all animate beings, particularly birds, great and small, at all times and places. Through the wisdom of this causing to rejoice and the infusion of life and spirit, animals and men are, as it were, whipped by the need for provision and the pleasure they take therein to pursue their provision and sustenance, thus being delivered from sloth. This too is one of the wise activities of dominicality. Were it not for such significant instances of wisdom, the provision destined for animals would be caused instinctively to hasten toward them to satisfy their needs without any effort on their part, just as provision and sustenance is caused to hasten toward the tree. Were there to be an eye capable of witnessing and comprehending the whole surface of the earth at one time, in order to perceive the beauties of the names of compassionate and provider and the witness they bear to divine unity, it would see what sweet beauty is contained in the tender and solicitous manifestation of the compassionate provider, who sends to the caravans of animals at the end of winter, when their provision is about to be exhausted, extremely delicious, abundant and varied foods and bounties, drawn exclusively from his unseen treasury of mercy, as succor from the unseen and divine generosity, placed in the hands of plants, the crowns of trees, and the breasts of mothers. The possessor of that all-seeing eye would realize the following: the making of a single apple and the generous giving of it to a man as true sustenance and provision can be accomplished only by a being who causes the seasons, the nights, and the days to rotate, who causes the globe to revolve like a cargo ship, and thus brings the fruits of the seasons within reach of those needy guests of the earth who stand waiting for them. For the stamp of its nature, the seal of wisdom, the imprint of eternal besottedness, the signet of mercy that is to be found on the surface of the apple is to be found also on all apples and other fruits, plants, and animals. Hence, the true master and maker of the apple is bound to be the glorious sovereign, the beauteous creator of all the inhabitants of the world, who are the peers, the congeners, and the brothers of the apple, of the vast earth that is the garden of the apple, of the tree of the cosmos that is its factory, of the seasons that are its workshop, and of the spring and summer that are its place of maturing. In other words, every fruit is a seal of unity that makes known the writer and maker of the earth, its tree, and of the book of the universe, its garden. It demonstrates his unity and shows to the number of fruits the seal affixed to the decree of unity. Since the Risale-i Nur is a manifestation of the names of all compassionate and all wise, and numerous flashes and mysteries of the truth of compassionateness have been expounded and proved in many parts of the Risale-i Nur, we leave further discussion of the matter to those parts, and content ourselves with this brief indication out of a vast treasury on account of the unfavorable circumstances from which we are now suffering. Our traveler now says, "Praise be to God! I have seen and heard 33 truths bearing witness to the necessary existence and unity of the Creator and Sovereign I was everywhere seeking and inquiring after. Each of the truths is bright as the sun and leaves no darkness behind. It is as strong and unshakable as a mountain. Each of them, with its verifications, bears decisive witness to his existence, and with its comprehensiveness proves his unity in manifest fashion. While proving implicitly all the pillars of faith, the totality and consensus of these truths causes our belief to advance from imitation to realization, from realization to knowledge of certainty, from knowledge of certainty to vision of certainty, and from vision of certainty to absolute certainty. Praise be to God, this is from the bounty of my sustainer. Praise be to God who guided us to this. Verily, we would not have been guided unless God had guided us. The messengers of God have come to us with the truth." Quran 7:43. In extremely brief allusion to the lights of belief derived by our inquisitive traveler from the 4 sublime truths he witnessed at the 3rd stopping place, it was said in the 2nd chapter of the 1st station concerning the truths of the 3rd stopping place: "There is no God other than God, the one, the unique, to whose unity in necessary existence points the witnessing of the sublimity, of the comprehensiveness, of the truth of opening, through the unfolding of different forms of 400,000 species of living beings, perfect and without defect according to the testimony of biology and botany, the witnessing of the sublimity, of the comprehensiveness, of the truth of mercifulness, all embracing and regular, without any deficiency as the eye can see, the witnessing of the sublimity of the truth of administering, that encompasses in orderly fashion all living beings, without error or defect, the witnessing of the sublimity, of the comprehensiveness, of the truth of compassionateness and sustaining, embracing all consumers of sustenance at every time of need without any mistake or forgetfulness. Glory be unto him, the provider, the merciful, the compassionate, the solicitous, the generous. His gifts are universal, and his generosity is all-embracing. There is no God but he. Glory be unto you. We have no knowledge save that which you have taught us. Indeed, you are all-knowing, all-wise, Maish. Quran 2:32. O our sustainer, for the sake of, in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, O God, O merciful one, O compassionate one, bestow peace and blessings upon our Master Muhammad, his family, and all his companions, to the number of all the letters in the Risale-i Nur, multiplied by 10 times the number of minutes in all of our lives in this world and the hereafter, and then by the number of particles in my body throughout the course of my life. Forgive me, and those who aid me in sincerity in the copying and distribution of the Risale-i Nur, and our fathers, our masters, our sheikhs, our sisters, our brothers, and the sincere students of the Risale-i Nur, particularly those who write and copy this treatise, by your mercy, O most merciful of the merciful. Amen. The conclusion of our prayer is, Praise be to God, the sustainer of all the worlds.